no one wants to talk about the fact that like there's no perfect parenting. I don't think I knew what I was signing up for.
Which is very unlike you.
Yeah, it's just pure chaos. At one point we had 4 under 4. You're doing me a disservice by basically trying to like sugarcoat over the fact that it's gonna be hard.
Yeah, so let's just dive right into that.
The odds are that the baby will die. When it gets big enough, it'll rupture everything and my wife will die. Do not speak to my wife like that. I picked him up, slammed him, and started punching him in the head.
Clearly no one told you no, and your parents didn't spank you.
Everyone just thinks it should be rainbows and unicorns. Light's gonna come shining down and it's gonna be like, and it's not.
Do you ever take time and do things individually with them?
Yes. Sometimes you just need to sit down and shut up. Go discover something. I don't know, rub 2 sticks together. Like just
In
2.
hindsight, do you think it's as bad as you thought it was?
Yes.
Before we get into the episode, let me tell you guys about Tactical Baby Gear, the sponsor of the Ultimate Dad podcast and transparently our business. At Tactical Baby Gear, we design and develop highly functional, highly practical baby gear for dads. So whether it's the tactical baby carrier or a diaper bag like the Daypack 3.0 with the built-in changing mat, or our S1 stroller with the built-in wipes pouch and cooler pouch, Tactical Baby Gear has a wide range of products that are guaranteed to make your life as a dad easier. But don't just take my word for it. We've got over 70,000 reviews from parents who love Tactical Baby Gear. And if for some reason you don't, no worries. We've got 90-day easy returns and exchanges. We also have fast and free shipping. So go check us out at tacticalbabygear.com. And when you're ready to make a purchase, you can get 15% off your first order by texting Ultimate Dad to 844-230-0768. Again, that's tacticalbabygear.com or click the link in the description. Now, let's get into the episode. Alex. You guys haven't seen Alex in a long time. You haven't seen maybe either one of us in a long time. But let's kick things off with a dad joke. I screwed this up in the last episode and didn't do it till the very end. But we'll stick with our traditional ways. What did the drummer name his 3 daughters?
I feel like I have heard this one. I forget.
Anna 1, Anna 2,
that's
Anna
right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I don't know girl names, so I've got 4 boys, and we were dead set that the 4th one was going to be a girl.
Yeah.
So on the way to the hospital, the wife and I were like, we probably should come up with a boy name just in case. And so we were like, all right, well, no, so we settled on a boy name. And I'm glad we did, because it ended up being a 4th boy. But
4 boys.
Anna 1, Anna, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. We'll get into it for sure. Since Alex has been on the podcast before, but I don't think anyone really knows the extent of your history in all kinds of facets. So we'll do a whole life story, and I'll quickly do a bio and let everyone know kind of like more of what some of your accomplishments have been, and that'll, I think, bring context to your upbringing and kind of where you've been and where you are now and how you're raising your kids and that sort of thing. So Alex is a serial entrepreneur, magna cum laude finance degree. You're the creator and the founder of the original disposable flask, selling to major retailers like Target, Macy's, Restoration Hardware, and many others. He is my business partner and the co-owner of Tactical Baby Gear. He is a Christian, a husband who's been married for 14 years, and a dad of 4 boys, like you just heard. And I'm sure life is crazy.
Yes. Yes, though we're finally getting a little bit more sleep, but
yeah.
It's just
how
pure
old
chaos.
are all of them now?
So I've got twin boys that are 8. I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. So at one point we had 4 under 4.
Yeah.
And we had just gotten, obviously the other, well, I shouldn't say just gotten, but 2 weren't in diapers, but then the other 2 obviously were. So it's just nonstop diapers and craziness for, well, it hasn't ended now because it's still loud. It's still so loud in my house. Someone's always trying to kill someone now. It's like, it seems like now that the twins are 8, it's like everything has just escalated just a little bit more. So we just had the snowstorm here in the south, and we're going to school yesterday, so there's still some snow on the ground, and I of course made a mound. So I took off the bottom of a skateboard to turn it into like a snowboard. And then
Smart.
I had made a big mound of snow up on our stairs or our front porch so the kids could ride it down. And we're going to school at, 7:15 in the morning. And the one kid was like, now's a perfect time with it being perfectly icy to try to like snowboard down it on our way to school, and like had his breakfast like in a bowl, like some pancake puffs or something, and like goes down it, launches the food, like whacks his arm, scrapes him up. And so he comes up there just crying, and it's like, look, we've been awake for less than an hour and you've already tried to kill yourself. Like, please, can we just get out the door and get you to school? You were home all last week. But yeah, it's just pure chaos.
Yeah. We'll dig in. Let's start with your childhood. Where are you from originally? And what was your childhood like? Your parents, all that kind of stuff.
So, like most people that have relocated to the Bluffton Hilton Head area, I was born in Columbus, Ohio. I moved down here when I was 4. We moved down the year that Hurricane Hugo hit Charleston, and it snowed that year. So we came down here, and my dad was just like, "What? I thought we left Ohio. Like, what's happening?" But I've got an older brother. I've got a younger sister, so I'm the middle child. Which I think kind of we followed suit. My brother was the firstborn, was very much the intellectual one. I was in the middle, just being a middle child. And then my sister, and I think the dynamic maybe just being the girl, the younger sister. She had 2 older brothers that constantly were like overprotective and everything else, but then she always was the one that got picked on, right? So I think that probably helped with some of her resilience as well. Just you go on trips and you get to make fun of your little sister, right? And so, it was like you'd be at church and we'd be, who you poking, who you doing this, until your mom, it's like threatens the wooden spoon and everything else, because, we're getting out of line. But it was a pretty normal childhood. I was very fortunate to have, both my father and mom in the picture my entire life. They've been married 40 plus years, and we followed a traditional path in the sense that my dad was the one who went to work outside the home, and my mom worked inside the home, taking care of us and feeding us and dealing with all of the runny noses and the Uber moms taking us to all the soccer and baseball and everything else. There was no real hardships that we had to overcome as a child. Growing up, it was a very much a traditional path. As my dad worked and we got older, income slowly grew with that, and so we had more opportunities present ourselves. But the biggest thing that I took away from my childhood was the fact that like I got a ridiculously strong work ethic just because I saw how my dad worked. And so as when he was home with us, he was very involved with us, just like my mom, but then I saw him mow the yard, and I saw him, if the house needed painting, all of a sudden he's painting the entire house, because that's what you do, you take care of your stuff. And so I think that was instilled in me at a young age, which is why when we grew up on a golf course. And so I think when I was maybe 6 or 7, I'd be going into the lagoons and marshes and collecting golf balls and cleaning them up. And then I'd set up the table with lemonade, and the golfers would come by and they would pick up a ball. It's like, "Oh, I lost this yesterday." And I'm like, "That's great, but if you want it back, it's going to be $1, And so, I got that. I got worth ethic, entrepreneurial spirit, very much from my dad. And then, that's just carried through my entire life.
And what did your dad do for work? Was he working for himself? Is that where you got that from?
No, well, so he always had some side businesses, but his career profession was in banking. So he went from branch manager into mortgage origination and housing, and that's what he still does today. But like when we grew up in Columbus, he started a car wash business, actually with Dave from Wendy's. I forget his last name, but
Oh,
the
yeah.
the founder of Wendy's, he was his business partner in a car wash dealership up in Columbus, Ohio. But so he'd work his work his time at the bank, then go finish up at the car dealership, work on the weekends, and um,
My
you know,
aunt was neighbors with him.
oh yeah,
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 in Ohio.
uh-huh. It is a small world.
Yeah.
But
What is Dave's last name?
oh, that's good.
Keep
That's good.
talking. I'm gonna find
Dave
it.
Thomas.
Thank you.
Yeah. But so he would always kind of be doing something else, or
Some other hustle.
from there he started getting into, before like 2008, around Bluffton, Hilton Head, would build a spec home and sell that, take the profits from that and move it into the next one, kind of constantly rolling it over. So I always saw him doing something else. And so that, I think, just, got me into finance, and just from growing up in banking, and, the idea of owning your own business, or working, or, trying to produce and take care of your family in that regards.
What kind of stuff did you do what kind of stuff were you into in school? Like elementary school, middle school, high school, kind of into those leading up into college?
Yeah, so I always did sports. So, it was soccer, baseball for me. Once I hit high school, it was soccer full time. So that gave me some structure and, teamwork and friends in that regards. But I wasn't really good at school. Like my brother was the school person. It's like I hit my stride with school in college, because then I realized there was practical uses for what you were learning. So for me, I was, a freshman in an accounting class with a whole bunch of like juniors, and they were like, well, I was fortunate to understand that really well. And, they'd be like, I don't, freshmen normally aren't in this class. I was like, well, I can use this to make money. So like, sign me up. Whereas in high school, and they're like, here's the area under a parabola. I'm like, I'm never going to need this. I don't want to know it. I don't care to know it. I'm not going to be a
It's such a
physicist,
specialty thing, yeah, that like if you need to know it, you'll be in some sort of class or some institution that's going to teach you that with the context of why you need to know it. I think that's what's lost in a lot of school systems, is just there's just no I feel like in a lot of ways that you're just taught to remember stuff.
Yeah. Study the facts and regurgitate it, as opposed to actually knowing the application of it, which is why I just I disconnected from it in school. Like I didn't do poorly, but there was no motivation for me really. And so I went along with doing what I needed to do to get by as it related to schooling, and would do the sports to, which took up, especially getting into high school, just took up so much of my time. But otherwise, it was, I enjoyed wakeboarding and boating with friends when growing up. But I didn't have some crazy passion short of, I always found myself trying to do some side hustle, So when I wasn't, when I was younger, like I talked about, it was the lemonade stands and selling golf balls. And then in high school, it was detailing cars on the weekend and everything else. So like for me, now I might hang out with my friends, but there was always some sort of work getting done. So I'd go detail a car on a Saturday to make some money and do that before I would go hang out, or I didn't get paid, but work around the house. So, mow the yard and do that kind of stuff.
Do you think, I mean, you weren't like a troubled kid. You didn't have a lot of issues. You went through life pretty, I call it uneventful. Mm-hmm. Do you think that is, a lot of that's due to just like a solid friend group and being busy doing sports and just like always having something that you're working towards, instead of meandering around with nothing to do and just finding yourself in trouble?
Probably a lot to do with that. Yeah, I would say for idle hands, right? Like, so when I came home, my mom was home, so it wasn't like I could truly kind of get into mischief, if you would, if coming home from the the bus or getting picked up. So it's like that probably helped prevent me from doing stuff. And then it was like, all right, you got an hour or so before we're running off to, practice. So it was like, all right, come home, get a snack, do some homework. Then you're headed off to in this case, let's call it the soccer field, right? And then that ends at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then you're coming home and you're eating dinner, you're getting ready for bed, doing the rest of your homework. So like there wasn't a lot of time for me to potentially get into trouble. And then on the weekend, my dad was like, all right, I need you to mow the lawn before you run off with your kids. So it wasn't like I wasn't allowed to have fun or do that. I mean, I just enjoyed, going in detail in the car, having my time for just, it's interesting as it relates to work now. It's like so much of my job is, what's going to happen in the 9 months from now? Whereas when you detail a car, it's like it was dirty and now it's shiny. You could see the results from it. And so at a young age, I just appreciated that, like
instant gratification.
From that. So it was a way for me to be in my own little head, my thoughts, and just enjoy it. But I definitely know I have the ability, like we all have good and evil in us. It's just which one do you want to bring out? And so I always knew I could get in trouble. I could do all these things. For better or worse, I definitely had a moment of like, so I got in one school fight as a kid. There was a kid in my science class. This was eighth grade. He kept picking on one of my friends, and it just annoyed the crap out of me. And finally, I made a comment to him, and he didn't like it. And so he punched me in the face. And so I picked him up, slammed him, and started punching him in the head. And this was right in the middle of class. And so went to the principal's office, got suspended. And there was that fear of like my dad walking in being like, oh man, I'm just going to get reamed, right? My parents weren't afraid of, especially being younger at the time, they weren't afraid of spanking me or something like that. When I justifiably did it, I've got mixed feelings on that now as a parent. But at the time, there was definitely like that, all right, what's my dad going to do when he comes in? Am I just going to get whatever? And he just sat me down and was like, why'd you do it? So he tried to understand why I did it. And the reason was I was trying to defend someone else who was getting picked on. And so it was like, well, you do know, you're like, sometimes violence is required, but like in school, maybe you should have, gone to the teacher instead of, just kind of shoving him away, which encouraged him to hit you, which encouraged you to hit him back. But it was an interesting notion of that balance act of like, I always grew up a little bit fearful of my parents. And so I don't know if that submission of I don't want to do something wrong kept me out of trouble because I was fearful of my parents, or if there was a little bit of a balance too, where it was like, I got taught enough right and wrong, even though I still did wrong things. I knew which things should be right or wrong. And did that keep me, what's the expression? Like kept my nose clean enough to navigate without any real encounters with the law or getting, hurt or getting mixed up with anything, like, drugs, alcohol, all that stuff.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. You talked about your mom, with the wooden spoon and that kind of stuff. And I think there's a lot of things like that are super lost today, for better or worse. I don't really know how I feel about it. It's just an observation right at this point. But like my mom's same way. It was like the wooden spoon, like Travis got the spoon like just like straight broken over his butt, like a thick one too. Mm-hmm. And things like that. And that was my mom, right? Which you'd see my mom today, like there's no way that woman was breaking spoons over anyone's butt. But sure enough, she was, And my dad, same thing. It sounds like you were the same way. Like you had a healthy fear of both of your parents of getting in trouble.
So I'll never forget, we were driving home from a baseball practice, and I had a friend in the car, and that friend had a much more like looser home, like just across the board, just a lot less rules or enforcement of rules. And I think I dropped the F-bomb like in the backseat of the car, and my dad pulled that car over, and I was probably 12, 13, pulled the car over, pulled me out of the car, whooped my ass in front of him, put me back in the car. And it was just like that moments where, again, you kind of balance, like, as a parent, right? What are the levels where it's like, shame is being used in a proper way as opposed to just shaming someone because you're annoyed at night trying to get them to brush your teeth, right? To like change a behavior. But like, again, that stuck out with me. So again, I don't know how much that influenced me going into high school, where it's like, my dad's not afraid to, if I step out of line, whoop my ass and get me in line. How much of that played a healthy role, and then how much has played a role where it's like I wanted to rebel a little bit, you know? Where I could get away with it, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like I knew enough to, I'm going to try to get away with it, hopefully not cause any permanent damage, not get in too much trouble, but, you know, you want to rebel a little bit. So as you think about raising 4 kids, you're like, all right, what is that healthy balance of like making sure they can, you know, have their opinions and voice it and stand up for themselves, but then it's also like, but have I done enough to make sure I command the respect I feel I deserve?
It's like there's a time and a place for a lot of these things. I think as a society, I think in some cases we've gotten a little too soft. And I don't know if that's as a society. I think that's just some people. Like there's this whole thing of, is it soft parenting? Gentle parenting. Gentle parenting, which I don't really know exactly the full definition and why that is, but I certainly know there's a lot of kids out there that are just getting away with everything because their parents don't reprimand them. They don't tell them no. They don't stick to their guns. They don't put their foot down. And there's just like a complete lack of respect.
So something that I've become aware of more recently for me is this notion that, like, you know, kids aren't inconveniences. They're little people that need to be coached. And you could apply that to the tantrum they're throwing in the supermarket, right? It's like they need to be coached. And so you either are caving in and just giving them whatever they want, which isn't teaching them anything except they get what they want when they whine, complain, throw a tantrum. And then, you know, or if you're trying to be too gentle of a parenting, where it's like, okay, now let's talk about your feelings, Johnny. And it's like, well, Johnny's 4, he's hangry, he doesn't know anything about his feelings. So why don't you be the parent and tell him about his feelings, which is, we're not going to do this, and maybe you need to like remove them from the situation, right? It's like you got to stand up to him, like your kids. So the approach I've been trying to do with my kids, kind of taking it from this gentle parenting concept, is like, I'm not trying to be friends with them right now. They're 8 years old. They're 4 years old. They need a parent. They need a father. Hopefully, if I'm in their life enough and I create the boundaries and I teach them, coach them, once they become adults and they want to leave my home, which hopefully they properly exit the home, you know, at the appropriate time, they want to have a friendship with me. And so it's like my goal of parenting has always been like, I'm going to try to parent up to where they want to become friends with me when they're adults. I don't need a friend who's 12 years old. So that's my approach, because I feel like when you start to blur that a little too much, it gets a little bit to where like people are afraid to stand up to them or tell them no or whatever else. It's like, I'm the adult in the room. I'm the parent in the room. Depending on the kid's age and maturity level, I'm definitely going to take things that they say under advisement, right? It's like, you're allowed to have your feelings, and if you express them to me properly, I might change what I was going to do. Like even my 8-year-olds now, they give me a proper argument for why they want to go do something that I don't want them to do. I'll actually be like, well, you explained yourself well enough, so go for it. You know what I mean? I think it's going to end poorly, you know. Skateboard on ice, it's going to end poorly, but you're like, hey, no, Dad, I can do it, and here's why I want to do it. And it's like, sometimes you got to learn for yourself, you know. So, but you know, you see the kids that are just like, just getting whatever they want, and it's like, you're not coaching them or teaching them how to properly interact with society. And so when you see the 8-year-old at the, you know, the ticket counter just yelling at the person behind the screen because there was a winter storm and their plane was delayed. You're like, you think the man or woman behind the ticket counter wants you screaming? Like,
it's not.
like,
It's out of their control completely.
but they're used to getting what they want.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just a total lack of respect thing where like you see those things happen in public and you're like, clearly no one told you no and your parents didn't spank you. Like that's all the thing, you know what I mean? And then there's the other things that run through my head where like, is it that big of a deal? Like, because I look at the world so differently now after that situation with Kendall, and it's like my priorities are so different where it's like, oh well, I'll get home later than I wanted to. Mm-hmm. We're all happy and healthy and okay. Does it really matter if we're...
Well, it's an interesting balance even there, right? Between, all right, so let's use like food as an example, at dinner table, right? So they ate their chicken but didn't want to eat their pasta. And now 30 minutes later, they're hungry. And it's like, well, I could give them an apple because it's healthy. But I also told you, like, if you wanted, like, eat the food that's on the plate. So, like, where those balancers are, like, I can make my life easier by I can give them what they want. But I also know, like, you did eat enough food for you're not starving. So where's those balancing acts between, like, I want to make it easy for myself. I want you to go to bed. But why am I trying to make it easy for myself? Because I'm just done for the day and I need you away? Or what am I trying to teach you where it's like, well, you're fortunate enough to have food on your plate. I know you're not allergic to pasta, which I don't understand, like how my kid, like, I don't know why I have a kid that's like butter and pasta. And he's like, I'm good. I'll give him a hot dog and he eats the hot dog. I'm like, can you add the bread to it so you're not hungry 30 minutes from now?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to eat bread. But, so where are those easy decisions that make it, you can easily solve the problem. But by solving the problem, what are you teaching them?
Yeah.
And then balancing it between.
Well, that takes a long vision, right? To see how that plays out in the long run, which I think is lost on a lot of people. Like I think you're really fortunate for you and your wife to be on the same page with a lot of these things. Of like, okay, well, if I give in now, what does that do? It sets an expectation for today. So then the next time it happens, like, well, they expect to get what they wanted because they fussed and whined and they complained and then you caved in, and then that leads to something else, it leads to something else. And then 10, 15 years down the road, you've just got like an asshole of a kid because, you just continued to give in or you didn't say no or whatever. But like it takes having a big long game picture, which you're fortunate enough to be able to look that far out, but also the self-discipline that it takes, which I've been really interested in the last few months, is like this self-discipline side of things, because it's something I've picked up on that I've gotten from my parents, in different ways and different aspects of life. And I'm not self-disciplined in everything that I do, but there are definitely things I am very self-disciplined in, and in the way that if you're going to take out the boat, you got to do this, and you got to wash it, you got to flush the engines, you got to clean the life jackets, you got to rinse things off, and like take care of your stuff. And and I think that comes from my dad's career in like the fire service and sheriff's offices and doing work with the Coast Guard. And it's like there's a very particular protocol of things that have to be done in a certain order for things to happen correctly, or there's someone's life at stake, in his situation. And sometimes in the things that we do on a day-to-day basis or that I'm doing. But the self-discipline side of things has been really interesting to me that I just recently connected a dot on, and I'm like fascinated by it. And I was like, so for you, I'm curious where you feel like that self-discipline comes in. And it seems like your dad had a lot of self-discipline as well.
So I never heard my dad raise his voice.
Really?
Something I cannot say I've been able to manage. For better or worse, I definitely have more. I'm definitely one of those, like, if I'm alone in the car, right, and someone cuts me off, or even if the wife's in the car, like, I'll say something, and then I calm down really fast. So it's like I get it out, and I don't fester it. I'm not at dinner later being like, remember that guy who cut me off? Like, I've forgotten about it, 2 minutes later. But in the moment, it's like, you dumb, you know what, right? Whereas like with my dad, I never heard he never raised his voice. I never saw an argument between my mom and him either. They kept that private. Now again, that's also something that I've wondered about, for better or worse, with my marriage, where it's like I don't want to argue in front of my kids, but I also want my kids to know that it's healthy for spouses to have disagreements, because then how did you work it out? Hey, let's go here. No, I want to go here. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, and then how did mom and dad compromise, right?
Yeah.
So it probably would have been helpful earlier on seeing them hash out more in front of me, to some extent, but I never heard him raise his voice. But my self-discipline, or lack thereof, is, definitely being a little bit more like, what are you doing? And like almost causing a lot more of a reaction that I probably should. And so I've been trying to work on that. But it gets interesting because, in society right now, especially with the like social media, where everyone tries to put their best foot forward out in public, it's like no one wants to talk about the fact that like there's no perfect parenting. You know what I mean? It's a hodgepodge of, you did that wrong and you try to correct it here, and hopefully the long play and vision is you don't mess up your kids too bad.
Yeah.
And that's what you can strive for, but you also then got to take the kid's personality into effect. So like talking about, the food thing, it's like my middle, well, I call him my middle son, from the 3 pregnancies, the middle one. We were driving back we took him to the Kennedy Space Center. And so we were driving back from the Space Coast, and we were like, all right, turn off your iPads. We need to eat some lunch before you can watch anything else on the 5 hours back, 4 or 5 hours. The one kid in particular was like, I don't want to eat this sandwich and chips. And you're like, well, like that's your lunch. You can't get back on your iPad until you get that done. So for 4 hours, we listened to him yell and scream that he wanted to get back on his iPad because he didn't want to eat a like ham sandwich and chips. But I had the self-discipline to stick it out, because again, like I could give him what he wanted, which was something else, or
which
4 hours
would make
later,
your life a lot easier.
4 hours later,
today,
he finally sat down at the kitchen table once we got home and ate his sandwich. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But you got to just navigate the kid's personality too, which some kids just poke you the wrong way at times, and so you're like, I thought I had this self-discipline down where I wasn't going to raise my voice to my kid, but the middle one just gets under your skin.
Yeah, sometimes you just kind of snap, for lack of a better term, where you just kind of like, you just had enough, and you just like, you just yell at them for a second. And then, but I think it's okay sometimes, it gets their attention, it breaks them out of whatever they're doing. You feel a little bit better. The whole situation sort of just finally resolves itself a little bit. And you're like, was it the right thing to do to just yell at them? Probably not. But it did snap them out of their thing. I felt a little bit better, for better or worse. And like, now it's over, and they probably don't remember anyways, to be honest. I know my dad yelled at us for certain things. I mean, there's 3 boys in the house. It's pure chaos. My older brother and my younger brother were like always at it with each other. And I was the middle child who just kind of like sucked into the shadows and was like usually not a part of any of that. And it was, my older brother was like a total instigator, and Travis usually got the brunt of it, and I was like, no one can see me.
If your attention's focused there, then
we were always scared of my dad. And I can only remember, actually remember being yelled at a couple of times. And maybe that's all it was, and that's all it took for me to be scared of him. I mean, there were some situations later in life that involved the police that was, we can talk about that later if we want to, but I was definitely terrified. But there's just a bit of lost, like, discipline, I think, with this whole, like, gentle parenting thing and all that kind of stuff that, there was times, when we were kids, I mean, what are some of the other things that you got threatened with as a kid that just don't exist today? Can you remember anything?
I mean, I remember being like, sit at the table until you finish this,
Mm-hmm.
So, for better or worse, right? Like you almost have so much information now where it's like, okay, well, I don't want to give my kids a complex on food. And, so like now you're like, okay, well, how am I supposed to talk to them about food so they don't have a complex, on what they're eating or if they're going to be overweight or underweight? There's just, you got all this noise, which in some vein is healthy to be aware of some stuff, but then it's almost like so much information that you don't know how to then act, so you just don't act. And then I think that that's not the right answer too. But like I remember sitting at the kitchen table because I just refused to try to eat. You need to eat a carrot tonight.
Yeah.
And it's like 3 hours later, I'm still sitting at the table. It's 9 o'clock at night, and everyone else is going to bed. And it's like, well, don't get up from the table until you eat it. And not me being stubborn. It was like, well, I'm not going to do it, and see how long. But
there was all kinds of stuff I can remember that was just like, like threats. It was like, you're going to stay in your room until your dad gets home. And you're like, oh, Jesus. All right. So you spend the next like 3 hours waiting for dad to come home from work. And like, and the anticipation of it just
builds up.
Just terrible. Or, there's, I remember being in the grocery store with my mom and like, probably with 3 boys, acting a fool, couldn't, whatever. And I remember it was like, do I need to take you to the bathroom, And you're like, oh no, they can't hear you scream from the bathroom kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to get my butt spanked, And that was like a fear. And that was like something I feel like got threatened. And she followed through with, I think, a couple of times. I remember being drugged through the back of Piggly Wiggly to the bathroom. And it was like, oh no, they can't hear me scream back here.
Yeah, my mom plays tennis, and she has got a pretty good, backhand.
Oh yeah, I love it. There was also the stuff like getting your mouth washed out with soap, the spoons, and just like those things are so like.
So we'll for better or worse, we've used Tabasco sauce.
Woo-wee.
We've used Tabasco. So like if we're sitting at the kitchen table, for example, and someone like just says something completely disrespectful, I'll put Tabasco in their mouth.
Is that common? Do other people do that?
I don't know.
I've never heard of it.
I don't know. But again, it was just like, I don't want to, so I'm sure someone will comment and be like, you're going to like psychologically torture them or something else. And it's like, well, maybe. I'm sure there's something else I'm going to do that's going to mess up my kids too. You know what I mean? So like, hopefully I've created an environment where they're willing to talk to me. So I'll never do it and then not explain fully and then like circle back around with a conversation. But in the moment, it's like, you're not thinking, so I'm going to do something to remind you that you need to think. Just like in anything, like can you think before you do? But yeah, we use Tabasco sauce.
That'll get your attention.
But then what I do is normally like I'll put it on my food and eat it in front of them to be like, look, like I'm not doing anything that I'm not willing to do myself, but you're probably not going to like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tabasco sauce.
So back to your childhood, were your parents supportive of all the things you wanted to do? Did they force you to do like certain sports that you didn't want to do and you just learned to like it? Or is it, what was that like?
They were always very supportive. And so supportive sometimes that like it backfired on me in the sense that there was the first season my brother, I think, ever played soccer. My parents asked me if I wanted to play soccer. And I was like, well, maybe. And they were like, well, if you don't want to play, like, that's fine. But, like, we'll take you bowling right now, or you can play, or we'll sign you up for soccer. Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, the short-term gratification. I was like, I want to go bowling. So my brother played on a team, and I went bowling. And so then every, like, weekend after that, I had to stand on the soccer field watching him play. And I was like, well, this sucks. Like, I want to play. And my parents just, like, were not the ones that were like, they could have easily gotten me on a team. They're like, you made a decision not to play. You went bowling. So now you get to watch your brother play the rest of the season. And so like, again, supportive of like, I'm going to support the decision you made to prove a point that you need to think through your actions and your decision. Granted, yeah, I was young, but like still like it stood out with me as like, that was a lesson I have never forgotten. Like if I'm going to do something, there's consequences for the decision. left, right, or indifferent.
Yeah.
But
So that's something though that was instilled in you as a kid that you've then followed through with your kids of that kind of stuff. Because clearly, I mean, plenty of other people will be like, well, let me talk to the coach. Let me see if we can get you on a team or to the league or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
well, because it's so easy to like, right? You're like, oh well, I'm gonna defend my kid to the teacher. It's like Johnny didn't do his homework. Why are you trying to defend him? I mean, him not doing his homework ain't the reason he's not going to college. If that's the desire you want your kids to do, you know, or hopefully they want to do, not they shouldn't be doing it for you. But like I can't understand that follow through. Like if there's just something like blatantly wrong, for example, that a teacher did, you might want to have a conversation with the teacher, right? But it's like, no, Johnny didn't do his homework, and I'll address that at home. But like, give him the 0. You know what I mean? As opposed to like, so I say that, and then I'll tell a story about me eating my own words. It was I think second day of school this year, and like we had like a 1 day of school, right?
Like
and then
a
we had a
hurricane day
hurricane
or
or something, and so we were gone for like 2 days, and then we came back, and it was like on that day we came back was supposed to be the first day of like the basic testing that the kids do, right? And so one of my kids forgot his laptop. It's like, oh, you know, I don't want to make it inconvenience for the teacher, for him trying to figure out where his laptop is. Gonna have to send him off. It's, you know, we were just out because a hurricane just hit. So I was like, I'll run and go get the laptop. You need to do better next time, son. I'll go get it, but I don't need to inconvenience your teacher, right? So I'm walking into the school to give the front desk, you know, the laptop, and of course the principal of my kid's school is the one that greets me at the door. It's like, oh, what are you doing here? It's like, one of my kids forgot his laptop. I know it's a test day. I normally wouldn't do this, but I don't want to inconvenience the teacher. And I just got completely reprimanded by the principal, being like, well, if it was really important to your son, he wouldn't have forgotten it. So maybe you shouldn't cater to. I was like, yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. You know, and it was like I felt like I had my childhood all over again in that moment. It's like, well, if you really wanted it that hard, you would have made it a priority and not forgotten it. And I'm like, he's also 8 years old, and we just had a hurricane, so like, and it's test day, you know. So, but it's an interesting balance. But yeah, it's like even at an old age, I could like older age, like get reprimanded by a principal still just like scares you.
I know.
Like, I'm so sorry.
I usually get in trouble when I walk in there with my hat. She's like, I'm like, yeah, thanks, sorry. Oh, it's just a hat. Always gets me in trouble.
It does. Yeah,
Always.
Yeah. But no, they were always supportive of anything I wanted to do, whether it was do this business. I mean, even starting my first business, it was like, how can we help you without giving you the handout?
Yeah.
It was always, how can we help you without giving you a handout?
Yeah. That's cool. That's really awesome of them. Clearly it seems to have paid off. So you get through high school, all this stuff, really no major drama, nothing to really speak of. Did you have a pretty good idea, like towards the end of high school, that you wanted to go to college and that you had some sort of goal or vision for what the next phase of life looked like? Or was that something that your dad kind of was like, you're going to go to college and that's what you're going to do? Or your mom?
In my house, it was never talked about. Like, it was just, I guess it was like it was just the like understood that like you will go to college. You know what I mean? Both my parents did go to college. That's actually where they met. But yeah, like it was never. As I think about it, I wouldn't have been surprised if I gave my parents the proper outline of why I wasn't going to college and what I was doing, that I think they probably would have supported me with pushback. I think they would have been like, well, are you kind of like, you sure you don't want to play on the soccer team and you want to go bowling, buddy? Like, maybe college is a better choice. But I don't know if they would have not let me do what I would, as long as I had a plan. But yeah, it was just the unspoken, like, you go to college, like that's what you do, you know?
Yeah, especially in our age, our like sort of era of growing up, and we're almost 40 now, so it's hard to believe college was like 20 plus years, you know, it's like, geez. But that was like the the typical path everyone, like most people took, and it was like sort of understood. High school, get good grades so you can get into college.
Yeah.
You go to college, and then you move on to a career not using your college degree.
Yeah.
It's just what everyone does.
And so like I had no plan though.
No.
No, like for me, I went into college just sort of like always had this.
It was just like the next phase of education.
The next phase.
Yeah.
Like for me, there wasn't something that just grabbed my attention. Like I wasn't just totally into science, or I was totally into
one thing or another. Yeah.
X, Y, Z.
Did you try to go to a particular college that like all your friends were going to or anything?
No, I specifically went to a school that no one went to.
Really?
Yeah, because I didn't want to be around anyone.
Guy like you?
Yeah. So, growing up in Hilton Head, Bluffton, so many people go to, USC, Clemson, in particular. And, my high school girlfriend was going to Clemson, and I was like, let me go to a school that literally no one's going to. So I went to App State my freshman year, where I don't think anyone from my high school went there.
I never even heard of it, so,
Exactly.
I'm not very educated.
And so, because I just wanted to try something different. I don't know what subconsciously was my motivation there, or not.
Did you go into that with the same degree that you ended up with?
Yeah, well, I was going on the business degree track and then specializing in financing. So I knew as a freshman you do all your basic classes anyways. So I think I was like, I'll probably do something in business, but let's just knock out all the basic stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I transferred actually out my sophomore year to College of Charleston, where I had my best friend at the time was there, and so I kind of changed it up after I kind of got my 1 year under me of just freshman craziness, and then I went to a school where at least I had my best friend from high school there.
Is that one of the things that drew you to go to school there? Or were there other reasons?
For me, I realized that I just didn't seem to jive well at App State. What set it off for me was I took a social issues and ethics class at App State that was typically for juniors. I don't know why I kept taking classes with older students, but anyways.
Overachiever.
Actually, so what I did is I loaded up all my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so I think I looked for classes that were on Tuesday and Thursdays. And so as long as it was a class that was in the right path for me to, check this off of a humanities or what have you, I always did Tuesdays and Thursdays so I could have 4-day weekends.
I knew there was a method to your madness. There always is.
And I always made sure I did 15 to 18 hours. So I took an extra class than all my other friends did, or 2 extra classes, because I knew by the time I was a junior and senior, I could do 12-hour semesters. So I wouldn't have to work as hard, and I'd stack it on Tuesday and Thursday. So I like the last 2 years of college would just be a kind of more of a breeze. Or if they're more intense, I'd have more time to do that. But it worked out. I did that because I wanted to spend more time having fun on the weekends, or with the girlfriend at the time. And then it worked out that allowed me to have more time with my now wife as well. So, because we went to different schools, but so I stacked it. So I was always I was always a little bit thinking a little bit differently, I guess, than
outside the box
than
thinker?
my peer group.
Yeah.
But,
so you didn't go to College of Charleston for the girls, is what I just heard.
Yeah.
On the record, it wasn't for
the girls. The freshman year, I went in as a sophomore. The freshman year class, I was told this. I don't know if it's true or not, but the ratio apparently was 12 to 1.
Yeah.
12 girls
That's
to
the rumor
1
in
dude.
Charleston.
And there was definitely a lot more females than not. And then I dated a girl who went to UGA. So I then left. But,
On the weekends
it's worked out well these
yeah.
past, 20 plus years of being together.
Yeah. So good segue into your wife. So how did you guys actually meet?
So we grew up together here. We were a grade apart. So I knew who she was. She knew who I was. I had the traditional high school girlfriend, which will be something I've thought about as it relates to like my kids. Of sort of like it was in one vein. It was interesting to have like the one girlfriend to have some like stability when your emotions and everything else are all over the map. But then on the other side, it was like, did I try to focus too much on being around the girlfriend as opposed to developing more
Doing other
friendships
stuff.
with, so anyways.
Brandy and I had that same conversation recently. I really think about Cameron, right? As she goes into high school next year, and it's like, we've started talking to her about that stuff, and it's like, just, don't worry about the boys that much. Like, I think there's a healthy side of it where you start to, you have to go through some of those experiences and like kind of see what it's like to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or, and like maintain a relationship and be honest and, that sort of stuff. And like, you learn a lot through that. Compromise.
Yeah.
Like, you learn a lot about life and yourself and other people in that process. And there's a good side to it, but there's also the side where it's like, if you end up like locking yourself down and having a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever all through high school, and it holds you back from experiencing other stuff. Like that was one of the things, big regrets I have, is I had one particular girlfriend almost the whole time in high school into, I say college, when I went to a tech school. And it really held me back from doing a lot of stuff. And I ended up, there's a lot of like catering to their needs and, all these different things that you don't realize till 20 years later. And you're like, what was I doing?
Which again, there's a difference, right? It's like, all right, well, if you've made a commitment to be married, then you figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But when you're 15, 16 years old, it's like,
yeah. And
there's things you need to learn, but then there's also times where it's like, well, if you're having to pick between hanging out with friends or them, then maybe that isn't the right decision.
Yeah.
So
and we've had those conversations with her, and she's pretty understanding of it. And thank God. I mean, Cameron's such a good kid, but I'm sure there'll be things that she's, something gets screwed up or something. Maybe she makes a poor decision on, and we'll deal with that as time comes. But recently there was like this drama about these boys and whatever with her little friend group. And I was kind of, the rumor was that Cameron had this boyfriend, and we talk about it, and she's like, yeah, I mean, it's whatever. Like this. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, yo, what's up with so-and-so? She's like, I don't talk to him anymore. And I'm like, 2 days ago, this was like your boyfriend. She's like, oh yeah, I broke up with him. I'm like, oh, are you like, you good? You cool? She's like, yeah, it's not like I was going to marry him, And I'm like, all right, there we go. Like, that's the right attitude. Sorry, brother.
But so I had the long-term girlfriend in high school, but the wife and I was a grade above, and so we knew each other. But I came back. What summer was this? I think my summer after I finished my sophomore year. And I'd become friends with some of her friends at College Charleston. And my dad had a boat. I always said, like, oh, you want to come on my boat? But, like, let's be real. It's Daddy's boat, not my boat. You try to sound cool, but you're not as cool as you think you are. But I was fortunate to take her, like, my friend, and she invited some of her friends who I knew. And I was like, man, there's this really cute girl on this boat here wearing this like blue and white bikini. And thankfully I was gifted enough to not say anything too dumb that day. And she decided to go out to eat with me. And one date led to another date. And she had a different approach, during high school, where it's like she had, an occasional boyfriend here and there. But nothing was ever like, maybe like a year at a time, right? It wasn't super serious. She invested more in the friends as opposed to getting sort of sucked down into the relationship of boys. I think she had a little more hindsight there to be like, all right, again, I'm not going to marry these people. I want to learn about it, but like, I'm not going to not spend time with my friends because of Johnny, and that's just a made up name. But so we started dating during the summer, and then somehow she was definitely like, all right, well, I'm going back to Georgia. You're at College of Charleston. Like, I'm not into this long distance relationship thing. And again, somehow I conned her into agreeing to test it out. And almost 20 years later,
Yeah.
we married for 14.
Good for you.
And so
that's
been good.
Give me just a kind of brief overview of her family, her background, because I think a lot of that kind of plays a part into, y'all's relationship, and then how she looks at parenting. I mean, what was her sort of
so
5 seconds?
She's got the same dynamic. So she has 2 older brothers. She's the youngest, so it's like there's an interesting mirrored,
2 boys and a girl.
Two boys and a girl. 2 boys and a girl. She was fortunate to have, continues to have a mom and a dad, in her life. And so
together, they're still married.
They're together. They're very involved with the grandkids. And her dad was an entrepreneur as well. So that worked in finding someone who's very supportive of my entrepreneurial goals, which I think helped us maybe avoid some traditional conflicts you might have in marriage or parenting. So when I need to, like, hey, look, I got to get on the plane and travel here for work, it was like, okay, like I'm used to seeing this. My dad, if he had to work late to make sure the bills were paid, then like that's where we would sacrifice. So I think that helped. It wasn't new to her, the sort of like, she didn't have a dad who had a traditional, 9 to 5. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was like, I don't know, dad might be home at 5, or I might not see him tonight. He always tried his best, but when you run your own business, it's that's one of the things.
It's great. You're always working. I mean, that's one of the things as a business owner, and we'll get into this probably a little bit more. It's just like the work-life balance, because us, you and me in particular, as partners, and like work-life balance is so difficult. You're always working. It's not like you're off at 5 and you can just go home and be with the kids. There's always something to check on, some fire to put out, something that needs done. And I mean, I remember taking an entrepreneurship class in high school with Mr. Holman. Mm-hmm. And he said, you want to have your own business, you can work whenever you want, as long as it's all the time. And it's like, yep. You don't understand that when you're, 15, 16 years old in 10th grade or whatever, but it was like, yeah.
So it's like, yes, I can stop what I'm doing and run home to go, be with my kids if I need to, but I'm trading off something else.
You're making up for it at 10 p.m.
That's life. You're always trading something for something.
Yeah. Cool. So she had a good family dynamic. She understands the work ethic side of it that you have, and how that plays a part into the family life at home with you guys. So you get married, and then eventually you have kids. Was this a conscious decision to have kids?
It was. We.
You felt ready?
No. You're never ready. For someone who wants to plan everything. So like, I'm a little. I shouldn't say a little. I like to control what I can control, and a lot of times I think I can control more than I actually can. But which is why I think I thought I can control how many kids I had, and then I realized that wasn't possible either, which I can explain a little bit more later, in this conversation. But we through dating and everything else, we did talk about there were times it was like, oh, would you want kids, right? And I was like, yes. In my head, it was like, I'll have 2, right? That seems like zone D, or
maybe 3 if things get crazy.
Man to man coverage, and we're good to go. But I didn't. I don't think I knew what I was signing up for. Like even in the conversation of talking about like let's have kids or when we were going to try to have kids, it was like, okay, well, I had one business. I was in a legal battle with that person because I found out they were stealing money from me. And so I ended up just trying to sell the business because I was starting to have panic attacks and like I'd be waking up in the middle of the night with like a seized up back, heart palpitations. And I was like, shoot, how old was I? Like 26 at the time, 27? No. When did I start having kids? Ish, somewhere around there. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like what am I I'm working towards a heart attack. Like this is not the life I want. So, but it was at that time when we were talking about like, well, like the natural progression seems to be that we have kids. And so the hindsight for me is I'm glad how it all worked out, but I don't think I properly wrapped my head around what that conscious decision was to have kids. It was kind of like the college thing, right? It was like, well, you go to college. What other opportunities are there? Like what else would you do, you know? And it was like, okay, well, you're 28, like start thinking about kids. Like I think I got married when I was 26. I think we ended up not having kids until I was 30 for me. So we had a decent amount of time where we were married without kids. But like that process was more like, okay, well, now that you've been married 4 or 5 years, like.
Well, this is also around the time you and I partnered with Tactical Baby here. Mm-hmm. And do you think that had an effect on y'all's decision where it's like, okay, we're in a better business now. We're in the baby business. Beeve's got 2 kids. Like, was there any?
So it was actually like, in Somerset, it was the worst time to have kids.
In hindsight.
Yeah, because I went from something that had some, not stable income, but like I could put food on the table. And Emily was teaching at university. She got a master's in Spanish and was teaching at UNCC. And so I was like, between my ups and down of income and her very stable income and health insurance, to then switch and be like, all right, I just sold this business. I'm going to start a new one that has no income. We've got a little bit of traction, but complete unknown.
It was a big gamble.
And then it was like, let's have kids. You know, so like trying to think back on it now, it was like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? And again, I think it was this notion of,
which is very unlike you.
Yeah.
To not like think through to the nth degree.
What are the what was the movie I just watched with my kids? Oh, this is gonna bug me. So there's this Pixar, I think a Pixar movie now, that basically shows like the point of view of like the emotions of a person, and like it's like they're in the brain of this, like, you know, the kid and Inside Out. Okay. And so it's like, you know, when they're younger, you've got like the 4 or 5 core emotions, and then like Inside Out 2, now all of a sudden when you're becoming a teenager, now there's like all these other emotions that come into play, and it's like from the inside view of like a brain, and you see how it manifests in.
Is that what that movie's about?
Yeah. It's actually done really well.
Is it?
It's really, it kind of like, as a parent, you started thinking like, all right, so I'm looking at my kids, I'm like, all right, how do I, okay, I gotta like, it is, anyways, I bring that up in the sense that it was almost like an autopilot of like, you've been married 5 years, like, why don't you have a kid, you know? My mother-in-law is a labor and delivery nurse, so like every day she's dealing with babies, and she, I think for her was kind of like just like ready for her daughter to have a baby. And so again, what sort of influence was our parents' expectations of us playing a role, as opposed to maybe us wanting to make the decision on our own? And so there's like a level in hindsight of like, was there just this expectation that like, well,
it's time. What are
it's
you guys waiting
time.
for?
You need to do this. And so regardless of starting a new business, those implications of planning it out, I was like, well, you should just do this. So it's like, you know, as I think back on it now and think about it with my kids, it's like, how can I make sure that they're thinking enough on their own without too much of, hopefully, like my influence on them to at least think and come up with the best decision that they can at the time, but maybe not an influence to push them in a direction that maybe they don't want or are ready for. But so that just, so we just kind of like was like, oh, I guess we'll just start trying. It wasn't as, so it was like planned in the sense that
we're okay with it.
we were trying to not prevent it, but I don't know if it really clicked on why we were trying to actually have the kids at the time either.
Did she?
That makes sense.
Do you get the sense that she really was like wants or wanted to be a mom? I mean, just in general, I guess, or is it just one of those like, I guess I'm supposed to have kids, and that's just the next phase of life? Like,
I mean, if I can,
I mean, don't put words in her
if I can take
mouth.
the liberty of speaking for her, I think there was a sense of an expectation from family and extended family that was like, well, now it's time and you have kids. So whether or not there was a genuine like readiness to be a mom, I think it was just an expectation that we just kind of followed.
Yeah.
And then we got the surprise of the fact that we had twins.
I was just about to ask.
And so I was actually at a trade show in Hong Kong when she had her first ultrasound. And I've got the actual audio recording of it. And so I'm FaceTiming her, we're doing the ultrasound, and the tech is like, oh, there's one heartbeat. Oh, there's a second heartbeat. And like her mom instantly knew what she was talking about. For me, I was like, well, yeah, like my wife's has a heartbeat and the baby has a heartbeat. Like there's two heartbeats. This isn't revolutionary here. Like
there's two people here.
That's a good sign. If there's only one heartbeat, I'd be concerned. And then it clicked, and I could hear. So her dad's an identical twin as well, and he's driving like on the phone, just listening to make sure everything was okay. You hear it's like tires start screeching on the side of the road. He almost gets in a car accident because he's processing the fact that there's two
twins
of them in there.
I remember some of it. Well, before I get into that, how did you first find out she was pregnant? Did she do any like big elaborate like surprise or anything like that? Any big story?
So it's hard for me to think about the first announcement
because second one
the second one for the third kid was so, and then the fourth one was even top that like I forget how she told me.
Yeah. Well,
it wasn't, there wasn't some big elaborate.
Yeah. Okay. I just wondered because some people have like a wild story and some maybe not, but
because I think the wild thing was like
it's twins.
I probably remembered what it was until I vividly remember the FaceTime of figuring out that I had twins, and then everything else was like a blur before that, because from that point on it was like we just started a new business.
Yeah.
How am I going to feed two extra mouths?
You guys had some like I don't want to say concern, it's not the right word, but some idea that the potential for twins was likely based on lineage.
So being that her dad's a twin, it was usually the mother's dad's mom's side is what I've been told kind of passes along the twin gene.
Like
but given that he was identical and my kids are identical, I think the actual scientific thing is freak of nature. Because when the sperm hits the egg, it just the cells split. So there was actually we had this idea that there could be twins, but the fact that we have identical ones kind of like made the lineage aspect of it irrelevant, and this was a freak of nature.
Wild, yeah.
Yeah, and they are like, so when we named him, we had blue nail polish, and so we painted the toenail, like the big toes of, I think it was Nico, um, the younger twin by 2 minutes. We painted his toenails blue. That way we wouldn't mix them up.
Yeah. When you found out you were going to have a kid, did you feel like your everything in life was like going to change, or it was going to be different, or it was going to be bad, or it was going to be better? Or did you have any like everything's my life is over now and it's, or anything like that?
No, I guess with my personality, it's probably not politically correct for me to talk about kids as a problem. But here's this new problem presented in my life that is, I now have to, because I was raised in, and I wanted to take care of my kids, and like, so it's like I now have a problem that is, you've got two more mouths to feed, you get two more humans to raise, you have two more humans to interact with. How are you going to solve said problem? So for the way my brain worked, it was like I need to find a solution for the problem. Again, taking all the love and affection out of of it, and just thinking of it as in like X's and O's, right? You know, ones and zeros, binary. But so for me, it was never my life's going to change. Like, oh, this is such a disruption and everything else. It was more of
how am I going to adapt?
Just an overwhelming sense of, now what am I going to do? Because quite honestly, I don't think it was really until the third one came around, or maybe even my fourth, that I finally had this sense that like I never got handouts from my parents. Like when I graduated, like my dad said, "Congratulations, and here's your cell phone bill. Figure out how to pay for it." You know what I mean? But I also graduated college without any student debt and stuff. So it's like I got handouts. Like, I'm not going to discount that, but it was also the sense that like, now big boy, figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was the same sense here. It was like I had family around me that could help us and support us. But at the same token, there was this overwhelming sense of like, oh shit, I actually have to take care of these people. And but where I was going with that is like, it wasn't really till like the fourth one that I finally was like, I'm actually an adult, and I actually, you know, like, I get to make decisions, and I get, you know what I mean? Like, even though I had all along, it was this weird sense that you felt like you were playing pretend. For me, it was this like notion of like, oh wow, like I can go to my parents for advice, but like the onus is on you. And I think it was the fourth one, because he was so unexpected. So she had an IUD in.
Hold on, let's not skip number 3.
Okay.
So let's not get ahead of ourselves. What I'm curious about now, you know, for so many people, they have their first baby, and then it's like there's a whole new dynamic, just like you're kind of explaining, and it's like your sleep is disrupted and all these kinds of things. And I'm curious how you and Emily sort of attacked parenting together for the first time, with the new dynamic. You're working, you got new twins at home now, you're trying to feed and trying to manage how to get sleep, and Emily's trying to be a human and not just like feeding babies all the time. Like, how did you guys manage that together?
Thankfully, Emily has that same, again, you know, from her parents. It was, you know, well, like, you're in charge, like, figure it out, right? And she is incredibly strong in that sense. So she was able to nurse actually all 4 of my kids for a year. So for the twins, it was obviously 2 at a time. And so the dynamic was like, she just made the choice and decision that this is what I want to do. So it was like, how are you going to support me on that? So we both got up in the middle of the night, and, you know, she would be nursing them, and I'd be sleeping on a bean bag next to her, you know, with a little blanket. And then it'd be like, all right, they're done. So I'd pick one up, go change it, and give them back, and then grab the other one and change it. And so it was, for me, it was a sense of like, for better or worse, it was a default for me in the position of, tell me what I need to do with the kids, and I will be there to do it. I need to change a diaper. I will figure out how to change a diaper. I need to swaddle them. I'm going to figure it out. You know, this was initially, obviously, on kid 3 and 4. It was like I didn't have to be told anything.
You just did.
I just did. Especially too with, having 2. I think I was so overwhelmed with like I don't know what to do with my hands now. That it was like, someone please tell me. It was like, okay, I need you next to me. I need you to go change this one. And so like it was kind of robotic, and thankfully she just was a rock star in the sense of
She just had like a natural
hey,
motherly
this is
instinct.
what you need to do. And then thankfully with her mom being labor and delivery, we were blessed with like, all right, this sounds kind of weird, and and then we had a nurse on call, right? So like a lot of those uncertainties, because when the hospital she gave birth in was not one where they take the baby to the nursery, those first times and bring it back. It was like you give birth and then babies are there, and the nurses occasionally came in, and it was like, well, I don't know, like they're screaming and they're doing it, and it's like, figure it out, and so that, like, I remember that first 24 hours, it was just like beyond hectic and stressful, because it was like there was no buffer period. It was like, you don't know how to swim, here's the deep end, and oh, by the way, we're going to give you weights. For me, it's like, okay, like now I'm just sinking, and it's just beyond stressful and emotional. And then you've got Emily, who's just having given birth, and the hormone thing, are just all over the place. So it's like you don't know how to support, you don't know what you're doing, and it's just beyond it. It was, for me, it was almost kind of like crippling, but yet I knew I had to do something. So we just I guess we had enough teamwork to where it was just like, you start to say something and then it just divide and conquer and do. And so it was like, okay, I knew I had to try to be the best I could be to, bring in income. Thankfully at the time she was on maternity leave with the university, so we had some stability there. The health insurance from the university was like a win for us, so we had a little bit more of a
some sort of
kind of support,
advantage,
support there for than I know some other people do, but it was definitely a I need to be involved, and we need to divide and conquer. So initially for me, I definitely defaulted more to
her needs, what she was asking.
Like, kind of tell me where I need to be, and I will be there, as opposed to the other ones where it was more, I could be much more proactive and be a little more present and actually lean in. Because the first 2, like the first ones, you're just so, it's overwhelming. Whether it's one, whether it's 2.
In hindsight, do you think it's as bad as you thought it was? Like when you're like, I don't know what to do, everything's crazy. Like looking back at it now, it's like, does it seem as bad?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. If I'm being honest, it is. Because like 3rd and 4th were easier in the sense that like,
you know what to expect.
I knew how to rock a kid to sleep, and I knew how to swaddle, and I knew, I mean, there's other challenges too, because now we had like, almost 2-year-olds running around, 2 of them running around with another baby. So it was like, all right, how do I try to keep you guys alive while we've got this other newborn and no one's sleeping? And in that case, we divided and conquered in 2. I was like, look, it'll be my job to keep these other 2 because they're eating solid foods, and, I can do that, and you just take care of the baby, But if I'm being honest, as I think back, like the level of just feeling completely not in control was crippling. But yet no one would have known it because I just like muscled through.
You just carried the weight.
And just did it, for better or worse. I probably should have talked about it more with the wife and friends, but it was just like, again, like, we've got a business to run. How are we going to pay the bills? I've got kids at home. All right, I need to change diapers, and and I have no clue what I'm doing. And I could definitely be much more of the helicopter parent compared to Emily. So that's something I've always having to kind of make sure I pull back on and being like, don't let me do this for you. You need to figure it out. But like, you're gonna drop that glass of milk and that's gonna annoy me, but you need to learn how to carry stuff, you know? So,
Yeah.
but no,
It's as
I
bad
feel,
as you
yeah,
remembered.
but yeah, because we didn't sleep for 6 months. It was hard. It was harder than I thought it would be, and like that's okay. Like I feel like so much that you're like you see on again social media, or you talk to dads or moms that have their newborn. You're like, oh, like we can only say positive things in society around having kids. And it's like, I feel like that's just doing everyone a huge disservice because someone who's struggling to be able to nurse or someone who's, struggling with sleep or, and is tired, it's like, like, you're not, you're doing me a disservice by basically trying to like sugarcoat over the fact that it's going to be hard. Now, I've learned this word and from you, and that is we can say it is hard and it can suck and it can be challenging and it can be all of these other things. And kids can still be a blessing and joyful and wonderful and everything else that we want to only present to the world. And I feel like too much anymore. And people only don't want to make it sound like they either don't know what they're doing or that something is more challenging because especially in parenting, because you don't want to be judged by the fact it's like, but yeah, but kids are such a blessing. It's like, yes, they are. And I could want to beat my child right now because he's annoying the crap out of me. Like, I'm not going to physically altercate, like, hit him, but like, they're annoying the crap out of me right now, and you're allowed to be annoyed. You're allowed to be like, you know what sucks? Going on a car trip and halfway through it, your kid vomiting in the car, and then you gotta pick them up and you gotta clean it out, and then you gotta smell it the whole ride home. Like, that sucks. And you might have had a wonderful road trip vacation. Like, it seems like no one wants to admit to people anymore that like something was challenging or hard because it seems like you don't know what you're doing. It's like no one knew what they were doing with parenting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I still have times where like I know I should have done better at parenting, but like thankfully they don't come out as teenagers. Like, you need the 13 years to running up to like hopefully understand their personality and dynamics, so everyone doesn't lose their stuff on someone, boy or girl with 14-year-old hormones. Like, there's a reason it slowly ramps up. But anyways, I feel like too many people try to sugarcoat it because you hear grandparents be like, well, isn't it such a blessing? And it's like, yes, and I'm tired, and this is hard, and I'm concerned about how to feed them, and I don't know if what I just said to my kids going to scar them for life and they're going to be in therapy because of something I did incorrectly. It's like, and they probably should go talk to someone when they get older anyways, because we all lock away stuff that needs to be brought to life, and that's okay. And everyone just thinks it should be
rainbows and unicorns.
Rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
And it's not. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So not a lot of time passed between having twins and having a third child.
22 months.
How'd you find out about that one?
So the third pregnancy announcement.
Third child.
Excuse me.
Second pregnancy.
Yes, third child, second pregnancy. That announcement. So we were having a business meeting down at my kitchen table.
Me and you.
Mm-hmm. And the wife came down on the stairs, and I didn't know she had been feeling anything off. And I guess we had some left.
She had like just gotten out of the shower, I think.
And we just had, I guess we had some random pregnancy tests left over.
Always.
Because we weren't trying. We were doing everything to not have kids.
Same way you did for the first 15
Yes.
years.
And
Whatever.
and she was like, Alex, I need you to come up here. And I was like, I think I hollered up there. I was like, Em, like, we're having a business meeting. Like, it can wait, you know? And she's like, no, I need you to come up here. And I'm like, like,
We're in the middle of something.
I'm in the middle of something. Like, you know, just hold on. And I think she said it like the third time. And that's where you looked at me and you're like, dude, I think you need to go up there. I was like, okay. You know, kind of did the like eye roll of like, again, like having at the time I was more or less working from home. And so it was like, and we had clearly defined like if I'm working from home, like, you know,
Yeah, that was back before we had a big
talk
office.
to me, you know what I mean? You could talk to me and everything else, but like if I'm especially in like talking with you or something that's like in person, like I'm at the office, right? So I walked upstairs and she was kind of like shaking and pointing at the pregnancy thing on there, and I was just like, what? You know, it was just like it didn't register. And I walked down the stairs afterwards and I looked at you and you're like, what's wrong? And my face was just sort of blank. And I was like,
you're like, can you keep a secret?
Yeah.
And I was like, of course I can keep a secret. You're like, Emily's pregnant. I was like, oh.
And again, it was just like, what? We're still, you know, very early stages of tactical baby gear. Still
young twins running around the house.
Yeah, the kids are running around, and it's just like trying to even find some sort of balance and normalcy.
Thankfully, I think things were a bit more stable for us then. Like I think we had some decent revenue and some income. You guys had just moved down, and you know, like it was definitely probably in terms of life scenarios, better timing than the first.
So Emily, she's extremely smart, and so she had just started trying to do some like teaching and stuff at USCB and some other places, high school, and so she was teaching some Spanish classes. So she was just thinking she was going to be able to get back into doing some stuff, you know, outside of the home for her own intellect. And then it was like, we got a third one coming.
Yeah.
And
and you guys have had pretty relatively smooth pregnancies and deliveries, really, right?
Yeah,
like no major hiccups or anything.
No, well, we thought we were going to have a problem with the fourth.
Yeah, so let's just dive right into that. First,
but thankfully, like, you know, like we had, you know, the scheduled C-section at 38 weeks with the twins because they don't want you to go over. Because she had a C-section for the twins, it was scheduled for my third child at 39 weeks, if I'm remembering that correctly. Everyone, we were very fortunate and blessed that everyone came out. I mean, the twins came out, you know, small because there's not a lot of space. But everyone was healthy, you know, no challenges or concerns that we had for anything, you know, lungs or heart or brain. So we were really fortunate on that. And again, she was fortunate and a trooper to be able to nurse for, you know, 12 months there. And then the fourth pregnancy.
Hold on, let's take a step back. Anders is born. You guys to make a decision to not. No, that wasn't then that you made a decision not to have more kids.
Well, so Anders, my third son, was born, and she went and got a IUD once it was after she was done nursing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is like it's a birth control. If you guys, like the guys listening, if you're not like, what the hell is an IUD? It's like a device that goes inside of a female, and it's birth control.
Yeah, it's like a steady stream of it for birth control, and 99.9% effective. And that's the reason it's not 100% is because of people like me. And so the most effective way to ensure that it's there and would do its job is like the OBGYN would like, she'll do like an ultrasound or like, is this properly placed inside the female? And so we had the ultrasound because a lot of times, if you don't check it out or if it's not placed there by like a doctor, like maybe it slides out, and for other reasons why it might not be as effective. But in our case, it was checked out, if you would. And so it was after she was done nursing that she could then get back on a birth control. That was a decision we were like, we're not 100%. In my mind, I was done. Like three. I come from a family of three, and she came from a family of three, and we were already in zone defense. And I was, like I did not think I had the mental bandwidth to have another kid, and so she wasn't, I think, 100% sold or not. So we went with like, hey, here's the most effective way to prevent having a kid. And 22 months later, we were doing the podcast in New York City with Gary Vee.
Oh, yeah.
And we were on the balcony overlooking the One World Trade Center building. And I get a call, and she's like freaking out on the phone. And I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, I don't feel right. I don't feel right. I'm like, okay. And like, she hadn't got a pregnancy test at this time. She's like, I think I'm pregnant. I'm like, there's no way you can be pregnant. I was like, don't. She's like, well, I've been waiting to call because I knew you had the podcast today. And like, so I wasn't going to bring this up before the podcast. But I feel like I'm going to go get a pregnancy test. I'm like, there's no way you're pregnant. Just stop. I came home. She's like, I'm pregnant. How? So she goes to the doctor. She gets the birth control removed. And we get the first ultrasound. And the first ultrasound seemed to indicate that the fertilized egg had not left the eustachian tube, I believe. And so, if I'm using correct terms here, essentially, it looked like the baby was going to grow inside the eustachian tube. And if that were the case, because it wasn't properly growing in the uterus, that the odds are that the baby will die when it gets big enough. It'll rupture everything, and my wife will die. So it's basically like, we need you to go get a more specialized ultrasound because you might have the hard decision of basically like,
not be a.
This isn't a viable pregnancy. Like if you keep this pregnancy, you're gonna just.
It's very high risk, and that's
And so we had to process that information while again having the, now 4-year-olds and 2-year-old at home, and we went and got the other ultrasound, and thankfully that technology seemed to indicate that, like, for all intents and purposes, like, it was just enough outside to where everyone was like, we think you're good. And given our beliefs and background, we were like, we're not gonna terminate this. Given that, we're gonna take that risk. And sure enough, my fourth was born healthy. But like I said in the beginning, like I would have put money on the fact that it was going to be a girl. Like, we spent all the time figuring out the girl's name and all my kids' names. So my wife speaks Spanish to my kids at home, as you know. So they're bilingual. And when they're growing up, they would speak Spanish back to her. My wife's not, doesn't have a background, sort of just getting a master's degree in Spanish and teaching it. So she just made the decision that she would always speak to them in Spanish. And so we always pick names that could be said in English or Spanish. And so we had picked out a girl's name because we were like, it's a girl. Like, there's no way it's not. She was like, everything feels different about this pregnancy. And even like, my mother-in-law, they were talking about some like nurses,
witchcraft,
of like, oh, if you've got this
Old
certain point
tales
on the hairline or whatever, it's going to be a boy or a girl. Or I was like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. And everything indicated that it was going to be a girl. And so literally on the drive to the hospital, it was like, let's have a boy's name just in case. And so we came up with a boy's name, and thank goodness we did this. We had another scheduled C-section because she made it 39 weeks without any complications. Though, I tell you what, if I'm not mistaken, every one of her pregnancies, she got the flu.
Did she?
Yeah.
Brandy-
and you
Brandy
don't get to
had the
take any
flu.
medicine when you're pregnant. So it's just like, how does some suck sound on top of being pregnant?
Yeah.
And I was just like, just watching her go through that, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm strong enough to deal with that.
Yeah. You know, Brandy had the flu when she gave birth to Kendall. And there was a lot of medications given throughout that whole experience. And I often wonder if it had anything to do with Kendall and her cancer. That she was just exposed to something that
Wrecked the biome in the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of things when your child goes through cancer and you're like, what could it have been? And you just think of every single little thing that maybe is, that she was exposed to that maybe the others weren't. Like, well, they all ate Lucky Charms, or they all, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there's just like, there's statistics, and it's like, well, 1 out of 3 kids that eat this are gonna, you know, and you're like, all right, well, maybe she was the one, you know, but I mean, I don't think it's so much something like that, but I do think it's, you know, possibly, you know, was it something she was exposed to, you know, at birth?
It is interesting. Again, very fortunate for my kids. They seem to have a better immune system.
Than you?
Yes. Which I'll get to, but like a better immune system than their peers. And again, I don't know if that's because the wife was able to nurse them for a full year. You get other statistics of like that meaning not maybe playing as much as a role. So I don't know. I'm a big proponent of it if it can be done. But my mom nursed all of us, but for me, she went on like a ski trip or something when I was like 6 months old, and forgot to properly pump and do stuff at the time. And so when she got back, she like basically was like everything like kind of stopped. And so I have more allergies and more other things than my brother and sister. And so we don't know if like, did that play a role, or is it just my, something with, my the way my DNA was sequenced at birth, and who knows? But we were thankfully, obviously, Thomas Fox was born and he was healthy, and I'm glad we had a boy's name. And
you found out with all of them, with with the first.
So with the twins, there was such a shock that we were like, I got like, are these boys? Are these girls? Are these?
Yeah, there's a boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl. What are we dealing with, right? And then with Anders, it was such a shock that it was like, all right, how are we going to do this? Let's find out if it's a boy or a girl. With Thomas, the reason on the way to the hospital, we were like, maybe I should come up with a boy's name, is because we just straight up was
didn't
like,
know. Yeah.
Again, I like, with my belief, I was definitely like, all right, what's God trying to teach me here? And I was like, all right, I'm not in control. So let's just humbly put you back in your place, that you're not in control. And then I was also like, it's not going to matter. So I'm just going to be grateful if it's healthy, given the way that pregnancy started out. So it's just a situation of like, we're just not going to know, which annoyed the crap out of my mother-in-law, which was hilarious. And I love her to death. But again, just being a labor and delivery nurse, she's like, all right, well, what are we dealing with? What are we going with? And we're like, we don't know. She's like, but I need to know.
This is one situation where you did have control. I get to make this one decision.
Controlling the complete,
Controlling the fact that you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah.
As as those things go on, we talked about how, like splitting things up and taking care of, infants and feeding and nursing at night and sleeping and all that kind of stuff. But, when it gets into like the really core parenting stuff, right, as the kids age, you get into like this 3, 4, 5+ group where you're having to really coach your children on life. And reprimand them on things, and that's stuff we've already talked about too. But I'm curious about like some of your core beliefs and the things that you try to instill your kid that maybe you are imposing on them from your own beliefs, or things that maybe you are taking from your childhood, your parents, your dad, things that they instilled in you, Emily's parents. I'm curious to see how that has transcended, if at all.
Yeah, thankfully, her and I seem to be on the same page at a high level of how we want to raise our kids. It's been interesting, just given the way our home life has played out, with kids being so young so rapidly, where the sacrifice was made that she's going to be the one running the home, and I'll be the one outside the home, working from a money standpoint, although her job's harder. Trying to balance the notion, especially with boys, just because I've been told I don't have girls, but it's like they're just like every day they're trying to figure out a way to hurt themselves. It's like, I'm going to be able to climb that tree and dive off into this with this makeshift parachute that we just made, just see what happens. You're like, don't do that, son. Like that's not how this works, And so I bring that up in the sense that like trying to find that balance where like kids need to be kids. And so in our home, it was like, I don't want to reprimand a kid for being a kid. Whereas me growing up was much more, and Emily was much more of a traditional, like, sometimes you just need to sit down and shut up and be and
Do what you're told.
The adults are being adults and you don't bother the adults, right? And I've tried to make sure that it isn't so like that notion of like, well, if I'm speaking to you and you come up like, well, I will acknowledge your presence, but you can wait your turn. Like, so I'm going to teach you to wait your turn in that sense.
Don't interrupt.
But I'm not going to disregard you.
Yeah.
That I never felt completely disregarded, but there was definitely the sense of like, kids are at the kids' table, the adults are having the adult conversation. Don't speak unless spoken to, right? So I've definitely been trying to figure out and balance that notion of like, how can kids be kids so they don't get punished for being kids, but then it's also like, but maybe you shouldn't have jumped out of the tree with a fake parachute because that's how you got hurt, But so it's been interesting to watch that dynamic sometimes too, as it relates to like grandparents and kids, where, at times it's like, it almost feels like we're being too lax on them. Like, well, they're being just a little more hectic at the table, and that annoys them. But I'm also like, but I'm not going to just reprimand them to where I want them to sit and be robots. So it's like, how can you be kids, but also teach them, coach them how to interact at a restaurant,
Which I think comes down to sort of like a respect thing, right? Or it's just like, hey, let's be respectful of this.
So we're at a restaurant, and you're not going to learn how to interact at a restaurant unless I take you to one. So I'm not going to just I don't give my kids an iPhone or an iPad when we're at the restaurant. Like, they're going to learn how to sit there and be bored and engage in conversation with us. But like, maybe they get a little more loud because they get excited about what we're talking about. And it's like, okay, well, like I will hey, let's take it down a notch, but not that like, don't, like the sternness aspect of it. We've tried to balance. But as far as like core things that we try to instill with the kids is, quite honestly, it's like, you can beat up your brothers, you can hate on your brothers. At the end of the day, though, like we're a family and we need to take care of each other. We need to love each other. And so like for us, a big thing that we've really pushed, especially, is, again, you're not always going to agree with everyone, but like we're family and we take care of each other. We look out for each other, especially like, all right, I know you were just making fun of your little brother for something, but we don't need to bully him. He's your younger brother, you need to take care of him. So it's those moments that you see the success come out, right? Where it's like, they were just making fun of him at the dinner table, but then Emily and I are cleaning up the dishes after trying to instill at the age appropriate level of like, well, here's what you do to clean the plate and, put it in the dishwasher and all that. they're like on the couch reading, like the older brothers are reading to the younger one. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like there's hope for us. Like you're hitting and making fun of them there, but like you really do love them. And so, for us, it's trying to instill in those moments of, again, how do you have the level of respect for each other and for your parents, So like there's a lot of time for me when I haven't had to do this recently, but for me, I had taken the approach, for better or worse. It's like when one of my kids would talk back to Emily and I happened to be in the room, she can clearly defend herself. Like she doesn't need me to step in to defend herself, just like she doesn't need me to hold the door for her, but I do it out of respect for her. I'll chime in and I'll pull them aside and I tell them, do not speak to my wife like that. I have taken the approach that that's my wife. You don't get to disrespect her. And oh, by the way, she's also your mom. But I've tried to instill a level of the fact that like your mom and I are a unit. Together we're a family, but you don't get to, there's going to be a level of where I'm not going to tolerate something because you don't get to talk to her that way. I'm not going to stand for that. And what I'm hopefully teaching them is the fact that like you show respect. Mm-hmm. You treat women a certain way. You treat your spouse a certain way. You don't talk to your siblings a certain way.
Is that one of the things you think a lot about is like teaching your boys how to treat a woman? I mean, obviously that's what that lesson seems to be about, right? Yeah. Is, teaching these young boys as they grow into men, like how to treat a woman. You want to instill the right things in them so that they respect women. And yeah, you think, is that conscious or subconscious?
I think it's both. I don't think I try to over-index it too much. It's just something that, again, was instilled with me. I think that's why, like, it's sort of that notion, I guess, like I just said with the door. It's like, how do I teach them and how do I react? Where it's like, I don't hold the door for you because you're not capable or you're not able to take care of yourself. I hold it, or I want to stand up for you because you're worth standing up for. You're worth showing the respect for you. You're like, granted, I'll hold the door for you too. You know what I mean? Just like just be
polite.
There's this scenario of just being polite, right? But I think for the boys in particular, and having so many of them, that there's certainly a notion of, I do not want to put more men out in the world that don't appreciate women at a level of equality, but also be willing to defend someone if need be as well, because they're worth defending. Just like, if you just see another human being in need or being attacked, are you going to blindly look aside, or are you going to step in at maybe the risk of yourself, And so like, that's just an area of like, what are the things that you need to be able to stand up for? And I think it's an easier or more opportunities of lessons present themselves in a home where my wife is the only female, and then there's 5 of us males, right? Where it's like
totally opposite of my house.
Where it's like here's a notion
out sometime.
here's a notion of like, you shouldn't talk that way to your mom, but you also don't get to talk that way to my wife, and I'm going to defend her.
Yeah, I think a lot of that probably, while you're maybe not always vocalizing, and maybe you do, what you're trying to accomplish with like some of these lessons, like that's one of the big things I'm big on. I'll touch on that in a second, but I think a lot of what you do is probably just lead by example, right? Where they are picking up on the way you're treating your wife or the way you might do something, which so many kids, from what I'm learning through this, and that, but the more, we've gotten back into the podcast stuff, it's like you really learn how much kids just inherit things that they witness.
What did I hear? So I was with a doctor yesterday, and trying to fix me because of our plane ride back. But he said that the way a kid observes the world is like established by the time they're 7. And
I believe it.
I forget the exact wording he used, but essentially it's like if from 0 to 7 you're in a home where you see, father being, uh, talking down to his spouse, right, or talking down to other people or the kids, or hitting, or just any sort of notion, like if there's a divorce that happens in that time based on the way that they're interacting, like the probability of that individual growing up and eventually getting divorced as well, comes some exponentially increased number. So it's like the framing of the way that a child starts to perceive the world by the age of 7 is like apparently just is hugely influential, right? So how are you interacting with
Well, just in
the
general, how are you
kids, how
behaving in general,
people,
right?
spouse?
What are they observing?
What are
and
they
what
observing?
do they absorb from that? Yeah. It's really interesting. I try to think more about it more and more as time goes on, and as I get older and wiser, and you see other kids in the world, especially when when your kids grow up and you start going to school, and you're at, or you've got other kids in your home because they're having sleepovers and stuff, and you might witness the behavior of another kid at some point, right? And you're like, damn, all right, I need to be careful about what I'm doing and saying, because they're going to pick up on this or that. And like, you kind of know that subconsciously, but it's easy to forget too, right? You kind of get into the groove of day to day, and you have to kind of be reminded sometime to be like, all right, like, don't forget,
Yeah, well, I'll so when the third child was born, I was giving the twins a bath. Emily was just in the next room nursing him before bed, and one of the kids, like, in this, it was like one of those ceramic tubs, so it's like if you hit this you break your face type tub, right? And the one kid just slipped and like literally just missed, like, just decking his forehead. It would have been a wonderful indentation. And like, I said the F word, but I said it in Spanish, and the twins just started clapping their hands, repeating this word, and just like it was a song. And like, thankfully, with Emily being in another room, she started laughing because she knew, like, I was like, we'll have a conversation about this later. But again, it was just that like in your face notion of like what you say, like they will repeat, they will hear, they'll interpret. And thankfully they didn't quite know, like,
They were just,
they didn't quite know it. And if they repeated that with anyone else, short of someone that spoke Spanish, like no one else is going to know what they're saying anyway. So it was like, got a little bit of a buffer there, but it was just that notion. It's like they absorb it. So
yeah.
what are you portraying? What are you instilling? What are you teaching? And so I think the biggest lessons I've learned too as I've gotten older is just trying to make sure you're present with them. So like in the home, we don't watch a lot of TV. We put our phones down a lot. We try not to try to engage with them as much as possible while not hovering over them. Like if they're upstairs playing late, like I'll let them play by themselves and then I'll go engage with them. But like when they're around, how do you show that you're present? And like that to me is a big thing that we try to just harp on in our home, is just how do the kids know that we're engaged and present with them? And I'm like, I'll come home and they'll be like, like you seem a little cranky today, Dad. And it's like, well, yeah, like, and I'll be honest with them, like, yeah, I had a stressful day at work. I wanted to get more done and I couldn't for X, Y, and Z reasons. And you came into my room last night because you needed something to drink, but you know where the water is. And then your brother came in because he lost his blankie. And the other kid came in because he wanted to just use my toilet as opposed to the one that's in his room. It's like, so I didn't get any sleep last night. So I'm tired, I'm cranky, and I'm not trying to not be, but I'm glad you observed it and said something to me, and then I'll give you the honest, reason why. But trying to make sure, not helicoptering, but just present when they engage, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the way that one of those things that we've tried to instill.
Do you tend to approach most of the stuff with them like adults like that in a way, or even the interactions with your wife? Let's talk about that for a second, because you went earlier on. You talked about how you never really saw your parents disagree or argue or fight or anything like that. How do you treat that at home with Emily when you guys don't get along or disagree about something? Do you keep that for behind a closed door, or do you let them witness some of that, or how do you handle that?
I've been fortunate to where there really isn't much that we disagree on or argue about that would be an instance where like that could present an opportunity for the kids to witness us disagreeing or not, to where we need to like, oh, we'll talk about this later. Like I don't remember a situation where we've been in like, where it's like basically like, put on your fake smile, we'll talk about this when we put them to bed. That's not something that is probably appropriate for us to talk about, not in front of them. But it's been a growing, what am I gonna say, a learning curve for us for both of us to be able to like say something that might make the other person feel uncomfortable, so you don't just sweep it under the rug. And we'll say that if they're in the car or not, as long as it's not not something that's coming across as disrespectful to the other person. But hey, get in the car, we're doing this, and the wife gets in the car and she's like, hey, you're sounding a little short to me. She'll say that in front of them. And then it comes down to me, right? It's like, how am I going to react to what she just said? Am I going to get defensive?
Yeah.
And make the problem worse, or am I going to swallow my pride and realize that, you know what, I was short. I might have been annoyed that we're late for church, but it's a good way to start going to church. We're like, get in the car, everyone, and we're gonna be, it's like that's
not helpful.
That sounds like a huge. It's amazing how much of an oxymoron that is. But it's like, all right, so I have an opportunity now to get defensive and double down because my ego is hurt because she just was like basically like, you're being rude to me, and it's like, well, the knee-jerk reaction is like, I'm not being rude. I don't know why it took you 15 minutes to walk 10 feet. Let's go. But I don't know what the other underlying things is. So yes, I said it in a rude tone. So can I man up? Can I be a responsible individual and realize that like, yes, I could have been more tactful in my delivery. And so it's been those situations that she's had to learn. I'm going to be willing to say something in front of the kids if I felt like I was being disrespectful. It's usually more of those things. So like, I'm getting annoyed because we're like, I want to be on time and we're late, and it's like this self-inflicted like, again,
pressure
like just
stress.
even with kids, right? It's like, how many times do you lose your temper on your kids? It's not because of what the kids are doing. It's because of like, you're annoyed about something. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be late to the school program, and you're like, or let's use church for example, right? I don't want to be late for church, and it's like, well, what's going to happen if we're 5 minutes late? So I need to be a jerk to my kids because he couldn't find his shoes? Like, all right, like once he gets in the car, then we could be like, hey, Anders, buddy, this is why we tell you to put the shoes here and not just kick them off in your room and everything else. Like, you can have a lesson about it, but just being a jerk to him because I've set up some arbitrary expectation that we're like, we got to get here and we got to do, because it's like,
yeah, I mean, frustration comes when expectations meet reality. You know what I mean? And if they're not aligned, that's where frustration comes from. It's like, I expected to leave the house 15 minutes sooner so that we could get there a few minutes early so we could park and find a parking spot. and do all the things, you know what I mean? And then it didn't happen, and then you're frustrated. But I learned, there's different reasons for frustration. One of the things I learned a few years ago was my wife and I will have different set of expectations for something. If we're going on for a weekend, let's just say hey, the weekend's coming up. She starts getting in her head about what the weekend is going to be like, what she wants to do, what she wants to accomplish, what the kids need to do, what room is going to get cleaned, like, I don't know, whatever the thing is, right? And in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to power wash the driveway, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to cut this grass, or I'm going to finish this other project, or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
So in my mind, that's what Saturday looks like. She's got this other plan, and then suddenly she's executing on her plan, and I'm trying to execute on my plan, but I can't because she wants me to watch the kids because she's doing this thing. And I'm like, well, I can't watch the kids. I got to do this thing. And I sort of started to pick up on this pattern a few years ago. So now I'm always, when I know that there's things going on or coming up, and even last night, hey, what's going on this weekend? What are the expectations? Let's make sure we're on the same page. And that sort of, like, or when we go on a trip, we go to Orlando, or we take the RV somewhere and it's a new town and a new city. I'm like, all right, what are your expectations? Like, are we trying to go find some fun restaurant? What do we do? Like, what is your mind look like so I can understand, so that we can all be on the same page to avoid the frustration, right? So.
And I think communication is something that we thought we were doing an excellent job on for a long time. And then when you start adding the dynamic of the kids and some other, life experiences, you start to go, apparently we weren't communicating as well as we needed to be. And so whether that was, again, expectations with how to handle a situation with kids, or, all right, I get stressed out in large crowds. Okay, so how can, from her perspective, now it's like, we just went to Disney World, so it's like, how can I help you be more present and enjoyable time with the kids when you don't like large crowds? And for me, acknowledging that, like, yeah, I don't like large crowds. My kids are going to have a great time. So how can I channel that to be like, okay, as when I started getting overwhelmed with stuff, I could look at her and be like, look, I need you to take over, because if I don't calm down right now, it's going to end up me taking out frustration on the kids, and that's not appropriate, right? Or again, not knowing, like, all right, going on the weekend, like, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and she wants to, and then if you don't communicate about it, it's just going to lead to frustration and more problems. It's like, it's amazing how much could probably be avoided if people communicated better. But also, are you willing to compromise? I mean,
well, I think everyone can get what they want. Like in the scenarios that I was talking about, right? It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you want to do this and I want to do this. So here's how, let's come up with a plan so we can both get what we want and the kids do their thing too, And that's I think where it comes to play, is like, if you communicate about it, you avoid the frustration and the anger and well, I was going to do this and I wanted to do that. And it's just like, all right, well, listen, in the morning, I'll take the kids and we'll go do something fun so you can do your thing, get that knocked out, no frustrations. You don't have to, I'll take the kids, we'll go eat lunch, whatever. Yeah. And then when I get back, I'm going to do my thing. Cool, everyone wins, So yeah, communication is huge. It really, I mean, it's the foundation of everything, really.
Well, and I think again, the hardest part a lot of time for me is, like, accepting when you're, like, wrong about something. So again, like, let's use the example of, like, being called out, like, well, you're just rude to me, and it's like, well, you could have gotten in the car on time, we wouldn't have this problem, right? Like, it's easy for me to be like, you caused the problem of me being rude because you didn't do what you should have done. Or you actually take the honest approach where you're like, yeah, like, I set up an expectation in my brain that
no one else knew
about, that I then delivered on pretty poorly. And so instead of me elevating this situation, I'm going to just be like, I'm sorry. yes,
Yeah.
I did it. And again, hopefully the kids, in those situations, right,
Yeah.
start to learn that it's okay to stand up for what you need to stand up for, and then admit when you did something wrong, um, or approach something, not properly. And so I feel like that's how we've been able to manage some of those, I guess, discussions in front of the kids that hopefully, not always handled the best, but teach them how they should properly engage with the world.
Yeah. So as your kids get older, what kind of stuff are they into? Are you taking the same approach that your parents did? We just like kind of support whatever interest they're in? Or are you sort of leaning them towards anything in particular?
So, kind of taking the approach of, supporting whatever they're into. We've been, I don't want to say forcing, but we've been encouraging them to do a sport of some kind. So it's like, I mean, I primarily played a lot of soccer. I understand soccer. I like it. So of course my kids are playing basketball right now, and then so I have no clue what's going on, and they've realized Emily took them home from a game last night, and I guess it finally dawned on them that they're short. Because the team they
'Cause they
played,
can't dunk.
everyone on the team that they played against was like a head and shoulders taller than them. So they were like, "Well, this game sucks." Because like the kids, because the basket is lowered for their age, like these kids are like dunking, and they're like a foot taller than me, and so like we can't do anything because they're just getting beat up. But
Yeah,
all
Max
that to
and
say,
Nico are used to being the taller ones when they're at home playing with their brothers.
they're home with their brothers, and now they're just getting hammered on. But because we've got 4 of them, for us it was like you can pick one sport. Like I'm not trying to, like, for us, I have we've taken the approach that if my kid's going to be some Olympian, whenever they find out whatever thing that's going to make them Olympian is, you're just going to know. You're going to pick up the bow and arrow, and the light's going to come shining down, and it's going to be like, oh, and you're okay. You're going to do archery. Got it. You know what I mean? Otherwise, like, I'm not over scheduling my kids. Like, we've taken the approach that, like, I don't want my kids to rush home from being sitting in a traditional 8 hours at school, 7, 8 hours over there, being like forced to follow every which rule, to then come home to being like, now go right to this thing, go right to this thing. It's like, you need to have the decompression time, and where you just roam around or be bored or whatever. It's like, you're not going to come home and watch TV. Like, you can go play outside, or you can go build a Lego, but like you're like, go do whatever it is you want to do. But I'm not going to schedule you something. But then multiple things, right? But we were like, okay, we like the idea that they need to learn some sort of a sport, in the sense of like, if you commit to it, then you show up to practices, you show up to the games, you sometimes won't play because you're short, you know what I mean? And you have to be on a team, and how does that dynamic work? And so,
you have
like,
to see it through.
You have to see it through. So it's like we've kind of been encouraging that. So it's like, all right, in the fall, what one sport do you guys want to play?
Well,
in the spring, what sport do you want to play?
Yeah, it teaches them teamwork and that sort of thing too. You know what I mean? Which is really valuable. Whether they're good at the sport or not, it helps them understand the team dynamic and those kinds of things. Or even jobs, right? Like when you're different sports, different position is like having a different job, right? If you're a first baseman, your job is different than left field,
And so with basketball in particular, it's been like, they're like, I don't want to play this anymore. This stinks. It's like, well, like, get better at shooting from a farther distance. You know what I mean? So you try to teach the lessons there, but we have them. We asked them, and because we think learning a musical instrument's important. I wasn't going to tell them which instrument to do, but it's like, I think we should do something. So they were doing a piano lesson once a week, and then now they want a guitar, but we were told to, a ukulele to start is better, at their age. And so they'll do that once a week just to be mindful of it. They're really into music. Like they'll listen to that. They love like classic rock. It's kind of funny. Like we're going to Carline and like Journey's blasting, or like,
Yeah.
and then like someone else will look at me and ACDC's blasting. You're like, it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
like this isn't the devil's music. Calm down.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we've just tried to take a little bit of the approach of like they need some of these structured things, or but I don't want to overstructure them because I just feel like.
But you're supportive of it, right?
I feel like if they wanted to do more, I'd balance that depending on what enthusiasm they have for it. But right now too, it's like I see a huge advantage of having my kids in bed and asleep by 8:30. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The younger ones, if I can, at 7:30, just because like that brain development, being able to sleep and get nutritious food is going to pay dividends for their, when they're 40. And so I think overstructuring, we've had, between Emily and I, we've had the conversations, right? Like, are we not getting them involved with as much because we're selfish? As in, I don't want to run around all day. She doesn't want to run around all day. Or is there a healthy balance where it's like, no, let's let them be in a sport at this age, but they've got the afternoon to actually be a kid and come home and just relax and decompress. Because, for me, we don't have to go down this tangent, but like at this age, it's like, it's sad how little recess time and how quick lunch is and stuff at school. It's like, I am all about driving home the core competencies of, English and math and science, but it's also like the Joker's 7. Like, can we let them run around for like 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, as opposed to like between lunch and recess, like 45 minutes is all they get? It's like, I just fundamentally disagree with the sort of like Henry Ford of pumping out, workers.
Yeah, like it's an assembly line or something.
Yeah. It's like,
do you find your kids picking up on the things that you're interested in? Sort of subconsciously, they're, whether it's business or money or those sorts of things. You know what I mean? Yeah, like, these are the ages too where you're trying to instill some of these core values, and you being from a finance background, your dad being from banking. Do you guys talk about money, saving money, earning money, that kind of stuff?
Yes, for better or worse, I think I've instilled my kids have talked about the businesses that they're going to create, in the how they're going to make money, and so they're like, yeah, Dad, well, so when I get older, I'll be able to buy you a yacht. And I'm like, go for it, buddy.
Yes, please.
But at the same token, I've tried to instill that like money's not everything. You know what I mean? So they've definitely picked up on the things that I seem to be interested in. It's like, entrepreneurship, business, finance. My kids don't get an allowance right now. I don't know how I want to handle that. I think being able to contribute to the household doesn't require them to get money. And then if they do something above and beyond, that's could be where you get paid on that. I haven't fleshed that out quite yet in my brain, but I don't want to pay my kids for something they just need to do to be a contributing member of the household.
It's like, by
it's
doing
like,
this,
I made your bed. It's like, make your bed.
Yeah, like, good. You can keep watching your iPad in the evening. Good for you. It's like you have privileges.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to maintain these privileges, you need to do the things you're asked to do. And then sort of set an expectation there is how I approached it. Like, I don't give my kids an allowance either. And, our life's been a little crazy the last few years, and it's hard to have even considered anything like that anyways. But Cameron earns money by babysitting, right? Like if Brandy and I want to go out and do, a dinner or something, it's like, hey, you're watching the girls for 2 hours, and she'll earn some cash, and that's where she gets, some money from. But she works for it. She's earned it. Like that's outside of her normal duties to maintain her privileges. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's right or wrong, and I think that may change. Like everything evolves, and you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe it does make sense for X, Y, or Z.
Like I could see where, like, as I got older, my dad started giving me a little bit of money for doing the yard work, and so that's that balance where it's like, what is like, hey, I need your help to go mow the yard, versus like,
this is your responsibility to make sure
like
the yard looks good.
but it wasn't, I didn't always get paid for doing it. It was more like, hey, I need your help, go do it. But I have noticed that the twins in particular, they talk often about, they call it the K twins, like K Twins Enterprise and stuff. So they're already talking about, like, the businesses that they're going to have and the money that they're going to make and everything else. So I've been wondering, like, how much, again, like, you see the kids and what they seem to get interested in and repeat, and you kind of wonder, like, wow, I didn't think I was some person that like either talked about money or try not to idolatrize. Big words. What am I trying to say?
Idolize.
Thank you. Money. So then you start to question, like, all right, like, what am I showing my kids or not? Because I'm willing to sacrifice money to make sure I'm with my kids and finding time to be with them over something else. But they definitely have picked up on that, which has led for an interesting, like, okay, they're interested in sports and stuff to an extent, but I could see my kids, like, I played sports all through high school. I could see my kids being like, all right, I'm ready to go, like, when they're 15, 16, like, hey, I'd rather go work a job and make money as opposed to being on the soccer team. That might change, but no, they definitely have followed in my footsteps on
it's
the
interesting, right?
golf course. Selling golf balls.
They should come over to my house. They can collect all the golf balls. It's just, it goes back to kind of like what they observe, what they pick up on, and sort of parrot, right? Whether that's the things you say or your interests or whatever. And I think about it a lot, and it's like, I think it's cool when they're into the same things because it makes it fun, because it's like, cool, we're all into the same thing. Like, this is great. But at the same time, like, I want them to think for themselves and do their own thing. And I try to really foster letting them experience all kinds of different things, right? Because it's like, how can we expect them to really find their passion without letting them just try all kinds of stuff and supporting that, But back to your point, it's like, well, if they make the decision to do that, if it's a sport, right, that has a season to it, a beginning and an end, well, you got to finish something you started, and then you can try the next thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's lessons to be learned in that.
100%. Let's talk about the last big topic here. Navigating the world with health, food, all that kind of stuff. You guys have a lot of self-discipline in how you deal with these things, and more than I think more than most others. I mean, you guys are super disciplined in the long game. Whether that's listening to your kid cry for 4 hours in the car because they wouldn't eat their sandwich instead of giving in. But yeah, how do you guys navigate the world of health and nutrition at your house? In the world that we live in.
So I grew up with Halloween being, get your one piece of candy tonight, and then tomorrow you can have one piece of candy, and the next night you'd have one piece of candy. And I don't know how many other people out there got birthday cereal, but on my birthday was the time that I could go to the grocery store and get the Lucky Charms, the food that was pure sugar,
the sweets and
like
stuff.
that it's not breakfast. We've taken the approach of, like, well, let's just go get donuts this afternoon. You know what I mean? Like, well, like I'm not gonna deprive. Like, I'm not. I'm not gonna make getting a donut or eating a cookie or something like that this like thing that's always held, within his arm's reach. And so, like, when they go to if they go to college or they go to a friend's house, they're just gonna go over index on like eating a whole box or whatever. That's because it's this forbidden fruit, right? Um, in the same token, so like I'll take my kids to grab a Chick-fil-A sandwich if that's what's we need, or run a road trip, right? Like I won't deprive them of some things that I know necessarily aren't the best for them, but um, at the same token, I'm very fortunate that you know pretty much all of our meals are home cooked meals. So they might not like what we're eating, but like they're getting a home cooked meal. And so we've really tried to prioritize, let's try to eat as clean as we can without creating some complex on food. So it's like, let's get the organic chicken and let's do this if we can. But if they need a snack and I'll make them some Easy Mac, but it's probably the one that
Off-brand,
claims to
whatever.
have a little bit less processed stuff in it, right? And so, um, just again, it's that like
It's just like doing the best you can.
there's so much information right now that you could almost be crippled by it, and then it's like, well, I'm going to keep my kids in a bubble and never let them go do anything, and like, or again, you just try to go like, all right, like occasionally we're going to eat a Chick-fil-A sandwich, but I would prefer that not, that happens once every 3 weeks as opposed to, a once a week or twice a week type thing if we can do that. So the way we've prioritized the health and nutrition aspect of it is to have home cooked meals. We also, again, kind of going to the not over scheduling aspect of it, because we know eventually our life will get more hectic just with their age and friends, and
Just the
when
nature.
the kids naturally need to start venturing out of the home and then come back to it. But when they're 14, 15, like being out of the home with friends is a natural progression to assimilate into the community. And so at my kids' ages, we've been like, how do we just try to lay such a great foundation that like we have meals together. And so what we've been doing lately is like when we're eating at the dinner table, because thankfully we're not running around to all the events, like one of my kids will pick a topic for like trivia. So it'll be like, all right, we're gonna name countries in Europe, like, and then they go around and like we'll name. So it's like this is stuff that they've decided, but it's like just that engagement at the dinner table, eating a home cooked meal, and then Emily's much better than me, but she in particular prioritizes like exercise, and so like that's just been a way we've tried to instill with the kids that you can play outside and do whatever else, but like exercising is a priority. And so this isn't mom or dad being selfish with us exercising. It's like we're trying to show you what is important, and taking care of yourself is important. So I don't know, play outside, do whatever, but this is something we're going to do. And so they'll see us go on walks together, or exercising. And so that's been another way to kind of be like, you're not going to sit inside and be on the TV right now. It's nice outside, so get outside. I don't care what you do, but like get up and move and go, because that's what
Yeah.
you need to do, and that's important. And so those are those, like, I guess, subtle lead by examples, or
Hmm.
ways we've just encouraged to be like, you need to get outside. You need to run around. Those are healthy. Go discover something. I don't know. Rub two sticks together. Like just
Take
get
these sticks,
after
try to
it.
start a fire.
Exactly. I
Good
mean,
luck.
like that's what I remember. Go build a fort in the woods and get a few ticks. Like hopefully there's no Lyme disease. But like
Yeah.
you gotta get out there and learn from that. So those are the ways that we've tried to kind of encourage the nutrition,
Exercise.
exercise. I mean, again, I'll prioritize spending more on food, which has been incredibly expensive, um, overdoing something else. So like we won't go out to eat as a family because we'll then spend that extra money on buying less processed foods that we can. So like that's where we've just made as a family in our budget, the shift. So like where do we want to spend our money, right?
Isn't it shocking how much more expensive it is to eat something that's all natural or organic or not as processed or literally has less ingredients in it, but costs more to feed that chicken. It costs more to feed those cows, grass-fed, versus feeding it chemicals and pumping it out of labs and, just putting chemicals in your food is cheaper than doing it the right way, which is just kind of insane to me, which I understand because, with Fight Soap, with our soap company, it's the same thing. Like our soap costs more because it has natural ingredients in it, which costs more to produce or to, to get together and that sort of thing than chemical made labs. It's like, yeah, we use dragon's blood, which is a tree oil from a tree in Asia or whatever. So it's like to extract the oil and process it, to bottle it, to sell it is more expensive than like some lab chemical. But it just like
it's
crazy.
that and then what is sort of been encouraged, for kids to eat or not eat.
Yeah.
And, like thankfully my kids, we haven't had to deal with any kids food allergies. I've got friends that have kids that have
all
big egg allergy, and it's like, that just presents a whole nother dynamic. I think the dynamic that I was presented with was, here's 4 kids. It's like, okay. Now again, I'm sure someone else who could handle it was 4 kids, and one of your kids has egg allergy, and it's like,
it's interesting that you say that because you end up having to deal with something, like something you're dealt with, you're dealt some card in your hand of cards. It's just like, figure it out. Everybody has something, and you never really know what those are or what they're dealing with or going through. And
it's like sometimes I think with my father-in-law, it's like you start you putting your problems down on the table, right? And then everyone else starts putting their problems down on the table, and you're like, I'll take mine back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, whether that's just because you know the problems that you have and you figured out maybe how to deal with them or not, or you then realize that
your problems aren't as bad.
Someone else is carrying a different problem differently, but is actually a big problem. You're like, oh,
I'll never forget that lesson Dakota told us when he came to do the podcast, right? Which is like, you've got problems and you've got inconveniences. The day that when you can write a check and make your problem go away, or whatever, that's an inconvenience. Problems are things totally out of your control. You get into a car accident, your child has cancer, you're like whatever, like those are problems. Everything else is an inconvenience. Deal with it.
Yeah. Come up with a solution for it.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Last thing I got for you. Have you ever thought about how you want to be remembered by your kids or grandkids?
Only very recently have I been able to let those thoughts creep into my brain. And I think that's just because between the business and between the crazy, just the more hands-on, it's like your kids get to an age, you're like, go shower, and then they do it. You're like, whoa, okay. I'm now not completely tied up at the end of the night, so it's just having more time to think. There's been some extended family death and everything else that has brought more of it into light, like very recently. I think at the end of the day, I think I want my kids to just reflect on the fact that my dad was always present with us. Like if I needed to talk to my dad, I could talk to him about anything. That's one thing I've really been instilling on them. It's like, look, don't be afraid to tell me something you don't want to tell me. I'm not gonna get you in like I'm not gonna be mad at you for telling me something you did wrong. Now let's work out what the
What that
problem
was.
is, and there might be a consequence for that action. Like if you threw the baseball and it shattered the car windshield, like I need you to feel confident enough with yourself and how I'm going to react as a, as your parent to go, okay, that was a bad decision. What are we going to do about it, and how are we going to try to prevent that moving forward? So I've always thought about, I want my kids to be able to tell me anything, but yet they know that there still might be a consequence for a bad action. But I guess to sum that up has just been like, when they're maybe 50 or 60, it's like my dad was always present for me at my level, and whatever that level might have been, not trying to force on them my beliefs on how they should do things, but just knowing that I had a dad that was present, I had a dad that supported me, and then let me grow into the person that I was going to become. But I think for me more recently is just this notion of like, because it goes by so fast, like it doesn't feel like it.
Until you like look backwards.
Until you look and you're like, okay, it goes by so fast. So it's so easy to get caught up in the, I want the business to be even more successful, and I want the bigger house, and I want the nicer car, and I want all these things. Or it's like, I've really come to realize recently that's like that we all want it, and we all want it usually more quickly than it comes or should come. And what you then give up by in those pursuits of wanting it done faster could be a relationship with your kids, or a moment with your kids. And to me, it's like that's me being more present with them to appreciate their individuality, and taking that in is something that then I hope they would reflect on, that like my dad was there for me, present for me, and understood me. Especially because there's 4 of them, it wasn't like just collective, like, oh, dad was there. It was like, no, like dad understood me and my needs and my wants and my ups and my downs. And if I can be present with them to be able to give each kid that sense that I was there for each one of them individually, is how I'd want them to think about me as a father, and then hopefully that I was the same way for their mom, my wife.
Do you ever take time and do things individually with them? Having 4 of them at this age, I'm sure is like impossible. But do you?
I've tried. I've tried. I started a tradition that kind of got disrupted, of like trying to take each one out to dinner, so I could have a one-on-one moment with them. But then it became a little challenging in the fact that like, all right, I'm having this one-on-one with them at dinner, but now I've kind of left the wife with the other 3 to like deal with, and so that was an interesting
it's a
dynamic.
Lot with the 4 of them. Yeah.
I found I try to take moments when, like, if I walk upstairs and one kid is reading by himself, I'll try to go sit with him, and when another kid's not around, and talk with them. As they've grown up, I invented this world and stories that I tell my kids about 2 dragons. Their names are Draco and Johnson, and so now the littlest one in particular will like crawl in the bed with me in like the morning or something and be like, hey daddy, tell me a story, and I'll make up a story on the spot that might tie into
Who knows,
some lesson or whatever else, and I'll tell them something. And so from that we created this club, and we call it Club Toad. So the Order of Adventurous Dreamers. I don't know, just made up all this stuff on the fly one day. And so we told mom, the wife, like, hey, we're gonna go have a book club. So the kids think it's funny to kind of pretend to mom, like, one of those like mom. Everyone knows that it's not that, and so it's not like they're lying, teaching them to lie. But and so I'll go in a closet and I'll usually give them some like riddle that I make up to figure out where I am in the house. And then they'll knock on the door and they got to go through this like, I ask them questions, they have to say a password, they have to come in. And so then we'll get all the boys into the room and we'll have kind of like a little bit of a secret meeting, right? Of kind of like a secret society, if you would, is the premise, right?
I need
But
the password to this one.
yeah, so but I've used that as, so your question was like individual, like because of the chaos. So it's like I try to use those types of situations where they see dad just kind of being silly and getting into being creative and not being some rigid whatever, right? And that gets their guard down to be able to go in there, and then we'll, like I'll usually like hide, like I'll ask a question, or I'll give someone a piece of candy, you know what I mean? So it's like there's a way for me to connect with the kids. Sometimes I'll go in there and be like, all right, Christmas is coming up. What are we getting your mom? You know what I mean? And so they get to buy into part of that experience. So I've used those ways that are like allow me to feel like I'm almost having one-on-ones, even though it's the collective group. But then they get to make up stuff. We came up with a handshake or a little symbol. It's like, as if you're feeling uncomfortable or whatever else, like give me this symbol and I'll know that like I need to come, talk to you or whatever else. But yeah, that's how I've tried to
Do stuff individually
do
or
stuff
whatever.
with them
It's
as
tough.
best I can.
It's tough. And as they get older, I think it'll become easier. Maybe not. But it's definitely, I feel like it's becoming more important now, especially as of being done with hospital life for us. And it's like, all right, how, or even when we were doing more hospital stuff, I was almost more aware of it because I was like, all right, poor Cameron's kind of like this forgotten child at home. And like, all right, I'm home for the weekend or for this week. Like, let's go do something together and spend time together individually, just me and her, because I haven't seen her in 2 weeks or whatever, and then Hannah, that's a whole nother animal. But she's, I talk about how difficult she is a lot, and she is. But I found recently that on her own, just me and her, she's like 9 times easier.
Do you think it's just an element of trying to get attention?
I think it might be. And I think that stems from, sort of being left behind when we were doing all the hospital stuff. And she's just like, I drop her off for daycare one morning and then I'm gone for a week and she's at grandma's house and she's like, where did mom and dad go? And, she had Cameron, thankfully. It was super helpful, but, and her and Cameron are really close. But, yeah, like even just last weekend, I realized it again. Because I was like, I got to go run some errands. I got to stop by Best Buy and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, Hannah, do you want to come with me? Which normally, you'd be like, I got a lot of things to do. Like, I'm just going to go get this stuff done. And then I was just like, and she was like, yeah, I want to go. So I was like, all right, cool. Like, let's just go. And she was a piece of cake. She was easy. She was like, walked around Best Buy. I don't think she's been to Best Buy before. Like, I don't really go there much anymore for anything.
It's funny you say that because I took the twins into Best Buy for the first time. And they were like, what is
this place is like magic.
I was like, this is a retail store. Like, you've been into grocery stores and Target, so
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, she was like amazed by Best Buy. I was like, oh yeah, you haven't been here. Like, this is the totally new thing for you, just going to Best Buy.
There's so many There's so many instances that I've realized that things you just take for granted when you're almost 40 that you've experienced, right? Like walking through an airport. And you're like, you take the kids for the first time through an airport and it's like, oh yeah, like this is completely new to you. Like this is an escalator, you know what I mean? This is a sidewalk. This is a street. So like we don't live in a city, you know what I mean? So like walking around places, I mean, like, this is how you not get hit by a car. Like,
yeah, a whole different
all
way
these
of
things
life.
that you like don't like. I've tried to be much more mindful too of like, or like if let's just use an airport as an example. It's like, okay, hey, like, and usually I'll especially for the little one, I'll tell one of the like Draco Johnson dragon stories because they're going on an airplane, but like the whole time I'm trying to like instill what you'll go to security and then you'll get on a plane and then you know like then you put your seat, you know, just whatever, right? Like you walk down a jetway, just little things, just so it's not you must hear about it, hear repetition, right? But it's like being like, all right, we need to go to gates, you know, 5 or whatever. It'd be like, all right, especially the older boys. I'm like, can you take me to gate 5? And they're like, no. I'm like, I know. Let me like this. So you see up there, there's number 1. Like we're looking for number 5. Like this is what this says. Go to the screen to find out. And so it's like those little things that it'd be
You're
easier to go to.
coaching them.
It'd be easier to go to Best Buy and not have someone tagged along. But it's also like, well, I can engage with my child more. That will make future engagements likely easier. And then they also understand how to walk around a store and maybe not throw the tantrum just because there's repetition in doing it. And so sometimes it's like, I don't want to do the thing that seems hard because I don't want to be inconvenienced. But if you would just do the thing that seems hard a few times, it'll make everything else actually easier. Yeah, but it's just so many things, you know, like, or just, when you potty train them, you actually have to teach them to wipe. You know what I mean? Like things you're like, oh, like no one told me that piece of the puzzle. You know what I mean? You're like, but how else are they going to learn?
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. I don't think I have anything else, but I hope everyone learned something from your experiences as a kid, from your dad, and you know how you're treating things, and hopefully it's beneficial to them. So, thanks, homie.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thanks for listening and watching. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, review, all the different things. Share this with a friend if you think it could be beneficial. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.